We present Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud, Peter Jones and Barry Cryer in just a minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And we're delighted to welcome back, after his recent triumph in the programme, to that fourth and vulnerable chair, Barry Cryer, to do battle with our three regular contestants of the game. And as always, I will ask them if they can speak for just 1 minute on some subject, phrase or word without hesitation, without repetition and without deviating from that subject if they can. And we'll begin the show this week with Clement Freud, and the subject, Clement, is distractions. Can you talk on distractions for 60 seconds starting now?
I think the distractions I come across most frequently are folk dancing and incest. It's quite surprising. Whenever you look up, there is somebody doing it. And it is incredibly difficult to keep your mind on the subject in hand. For instance, the other day in St. Paul's Churchyard, there were some 48 men and women dressed in country garbs with bobbins hanging from their head and knee boots with bells upon them, doing something called Morris. I've used the word...
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Morris, his stage.
Yes,
no, I didn't want to say dancing again.
Well, we realised that.
But I have half a point for a good challenge.
No, I was wondering why someone didn't challenge the idea of the first two statements you made, doing them together, country dancing and incest. But that I thought was devious for a start.
And distracting.
Exactly. 25 seconds is left, Derek Nimmo. You have a point for a correct challenge. You take over the subject and you start on distractions now.
When two or more brothers and sisters are gathered together to country dance, I find this to be a great distraction. It's not necessarily in the... Sorry?
It was a verbal deviation or hesitation in that he
sense?
went, ha, ha, ha. Even a repetition of ha, ha, ha.
It might have been a repetition. No, there was only a repetition of the sound, of laughter, which...
That is exactly what repetition means. I mean, if it were a repetition of gesture, you don't punish people in a radio show.
No, not in Just a Minute, and you don't do the same for laughter.
Repetition of sound.
I would say that he managed to keep speaking through his laughter, and I think the audience would agree, would you? So Derek Nimmo keeps the subject and a point for a wrong challenge, and he has 18 seconds on distractions starting now.
One of the greatest distractions I've ever seen in my life is Clement Freud with his great beard covered in soup stains. He sits there glowering at that evil
Peter
expression,
Jones
hot from the Isle of Ely. What?
I'm sitting much nearer to him than Derek Nimmo is, and I can assure you he has no soup stains on his beard. Deviation.
How can you assure us of that?
Well, I'm telling you, he
It's
has...
a radio programme, we've established that.
Well, I think
We'll
my
accept
word
your
is as
word
good
for
as
it,
Derek
Peter.
Nimmo's.
What? I will accept your word for it
Well,
and
thanks so much.
give you a point for a correct challenge, and there are 13 seconds on distractions, Peter, starting now.
As I heard someone say once in a play, the road of life is hard and rugged. It's a wise man who leaps over the hedge occasionally and has some fun in the fields. In other words, diversions.
The whistle, which Ian Messiter blows for us, tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever's speaking at that moment gets an extra point. And Peter Jones, you were doing it then, so at the end of the first round, you have a commanding... No, you're not, you're in the lead.
I'm in the lead, but it's not a commanding one. No. I know.
Because you're sharing the lead with Derek Nimmo.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
But you both have a commanding lead over Barry Cryer and Clement Freud, who have yet to score.
Ah.
And Peter Jones, will you begin the next round? The subject is where the money goes. Would you talk on that phrase for 60 seconds, starting now?
I know mine goes to the government. If you buy a bottle of brandy, you have to put money in a meter in order to get to the off-license, and then they take the tax or duty from the sale of the liquor. Then on your way home, you're as like as not to be stopped and fined because you smell of it. And so the money that you make or earn or even...
Clement Freud.
Repetition of or. There were 3 ors in that last phrase.
Yes, there was also hesitation when he thought the other ways he got his money. The, Clement, you have the subject after a correct challenge, and there are 19 seconds left on where the money goes, starting now.
There's not much doubt, but that we are in a period of great inflation. And as a farmer said to me the other day, apples are going up, to which I replied, this would come as a severe blow to Sir Isaac Newton. He spent so much of his life determining...
I think after that remark you almost could have retired for the rest of the round, Clement, and the audience applauded you suitably, and you have got now 2 points, and you're equal alongside Derek Nimmo and Peter Jones at the end of that round. And the subject is Derek Nimmo's now, and he... Oh, I bet he must have thought of this deliberately for Derek Nimmo. If the listeners at home caught that noise, it's probably the ambulance coming to take me away, because the subject that Derek is now going to talk about is Old Nick. And he usually goes with great gusto and venom about Old Nick, but he's going to try and talk on the subject. 60 seconds starting now.
The great god Pan, the devil, he who is unknown.
Barry Cryer.
Deviation. I don't think Pan symbolises the devil in any sense.
No, he was the god of the wood things on the little pipe, wasn't he?
Indeed, yes.
You got round to these other meanings to Old Nick, apart from you. I don't want to talk about you. I know we always equate you with the devil, but it doesn't mean to say that, like, I can talk...
But Barry Cryer was not acquainting me with the devil. You might have been, but Barry Cryer wasn't. He thought that Pan was deviation from Old Nick. And I would agree, Barry, and you have 54 seconds on Old Nick starting now.
Old Nick, the connotation commonly used, is the devil, Beelzebub, Mephistopheles, and such cognomens. The vision of horns, hooves, a tail, a fork, be it a treasure...
Derek Nimmo.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think
it was hell in there, I tell you.
He was doing very well, but he did run out of words there. And there are 39 seconds with you, Derek, on Old Nick, starting now.
That great fat slob who sits up there on this podium week after the same 7 days and adjudicates about this problem, this great, big, gross, ugly man. I loathe him. Old Nick, I shout every week when I come into the studio. How can I look at Old Nick getting more and more elderly? Every time I see him, the great eyes sagging, the dreary ears like a frog, ears like a frog. With an 84-year-old mother.
The round of applause was for the glass of water that I threw over Derek Nimmo. But long before he got going, Clement Freud challenged him. We'll come back to your challenge, Clement.
Repetition of great.
Yes, you're perfectly correct. And you challenged when there was 30 seconds to go.
Oh, did he? So is that?
So,
well, again in a minute.
You have 30 seconds on Old Nick, Clement, starting now.
This would be a short and popular way of referring to elderly Nicholas Parsons. Old Nick is the sort of phraseology which is used in, I suppose, the best circles who move within the British Broadcasting Corporation. But I have walked down streets in Hampstead, roads in St. John's Wood, avenues in Bayswater, and heard the populace cry, Old Nick, meaning that very man who is now sitting on my left, chairman of Just a Minute.
Who's going to speak next? Clement Freud is. Oh, the subject is a toast. Can you talk a toast for 60 seconds starting now?
My Lord Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, Your Highness, you chaps over there, not forgetting the bride's mother. This is the sort of toast which you would get at a congenial evening when a club or society gather in order to consume tomato soup, roast chicken, and ice cream. But toast is also a word used for bread which has been subjected to heat. A toast for which I have much time is called toast Melba, and was in fact produced for the singer, Australian, of that name, who was very fat. And toast is, first of all...
Derek Nimmo has
hesitation.
Yes, I will give you that one, Derek, and you have 14...
Don't you want to know how to make it?
We know how to make
No, you
it.
don't.
Of course we do.
You don't?
Clement,
Not the time
no,
for cooking.
you're brilliant
things.
in the kitchen, but we'd rather play just a minute if
It's
you don't
quite
mind.
interesting.
Do you want to hear how to make...
You see, bad hotels always make it by cutting bread very thin and baking it, and is actually made by making a slice of ordinary bread into toast, cutting the rinds off, slitting a knife in between, and then toasting the other two sides in the middle. I just thought I'd tell you.
Somebody at the back just rushed home to make some. Derek Nimmo still has the subject, and there are 14 seconds on a toast, Derek, starting
Have I
now.
got to give a recipe as well, or not?
We have a challenge in a moment. Well done, Clement Freud.
Hesitation.
Well done. There are 10 starting now. Derek Nimmo.
Hesitation.
Well done, Derek. 9 seconds on a toast, starting now.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask you to raise your glasses and drink a toast to old Nick, that dear fellow who adjudicates a week after week with such charm.
Derek Nimmo, at the end of that round, you have taken the lead again, and you have 1 point now ahead of Clement Freud. And Peter Jones, we'd like you to begin the next round, and the subject is Aries, and you have 60 seconds, as usual, and you start now.
Aries is a astrological sign of the zodiac, and I think it's an absolute load of codswallop, personally. It seems to me monstrous for people to believe that the position of the planet Jupiter will in some way influence their wretched coffee morning when they've read in the paper that it's a good day for entertaining. And I don't subscribe to this sort of thing. People are misled.
Barry Cryer has challenged.
Deviation, well away from Aries now into other areas.
I think that actually, yeah, all right, Barry, yes, you were going, yes, he was getting onto coffee.
I speak as a ram.
With your hair like
Not
that.
very often.
To you. Barry, I agree with the challenge. There are 33 seconds on Aries starting now.
Aries, my astrological sign, the ram-thrusting, forceful, magnetic, dynamic, charming, generous, hospitable, open.
Derek Nimmo.
Well, it just proves what Peter Jones is. It's a load of rubbish. He's nothing like that, is he? I
So what is your
mean, deviation.
No, he wasn't
I didn't
deviating from
deviate,
Aries.
no,
You
no.
definitely didn't deviate.
I was giving a dictionary definition.
It was more like monomania, really.
But he gets a point for it anyway, and there are 25 seconds left on Aries. Barry, starting now.
Brave, diffident. No.
Clement Freud is challenged.
Hesitation.
I know, you bluffed him out of that.
That was
when he
diffidence.
Yes, you were too diffident, I'm afraid. 21 seconds, Clement, on Aries with you, starting now.
It's often felt that people who are born between the 13th of June...
Derek Nimmo's challenge.
Hesitation.
Oh,
Derek?
come on. If one doesn't stop between words, one becomes totally unintelligible.
There are 17 seconds left on Aries with you, starting now.
Between these...
Derek Nimmo's
Well, that was hesitation that time.
Clement Freud has another point, and there are 16 seconds left on Aries, starting now.
14th of June to 19th of September. And this, in fact, is totally false, because Aries is nothing like that. It is a sign of the zodiac, unlike Taurus, which is the 19th of March to the 21st of April.
No idea.
Clement Freud was then speaking when the whistle went. He started with Aries and finished with Taurus, which I thought was devious, but nobody else bothered to challenge. He's got a commanding lead at the end of that round. I won't tell you what everybody else has got, and I don't wish to embarrass them. And so let's go to Barry Cryer. Now, Barry, would you begin the next round? The subject is what I wrote on a wall. Can you reveal that in this program and keep going for 60 seconds without hesitation, deviation, or repetition, starting now?
I like writing on walls. It's a hobby. It's a hobby.
Derek Nimmo's chapter.
I'm not.
Well, I mean, hesitation.
I was about to correct my mispronunciation of
I
hobby.
know you
in
were.
actual
It was
fact.
very bad luck, and as you were under great pressure,
Yes.
not only the fact that you've just returned after a very difficult ordeal, your first visit here, you'll see next to Derek Nimmo, the most difficult player of the game.
He treated me very shobbily. Very shobbily indeed. Yes.
And my wife has just arrived in the audience, which I knew through you because I understand that, and all the other factors that were pressurizing.
Don't go on.
I feel there's absolutely no shadow of doubt that you should get a point for an incorrect challenge. Have 55 seconds on what I wrote on a wall starting now.
Who's me? Oh, I thought...
Not you, no!
Hesitation, you didn't say anything
Barry.
there.
I write on walls as a
Derek
hobby
Nimmo
and a
has jumped.
relaxation.
Well, hesitation, you
No.
haven't said anything for ages. Oh.
He didn't hesitate, he started.
it
Barry, you
always
have
like
another
this?
point, and there are 54 seconds on what I wrote on a wall starting now.
It is a relaxation, a cause of solace to me. I write at my convenience, which is the most suitable place for it. I once wrote on a wall, Nellie Melder is the toast of the town, and just underneath that I inscribed, I love grills. Returning the following day, somebody had written underneath, you mean girls, you fool, and returning the following day, somebody else had written, no, he doesn't, what about us grills? The other thing I inscribed on an edifice, similar to the...
I'm afraid halfway through the joke you were challenged. I let it go because I wanted to hear the payoff.
Well, that's very nice.
At least I knew the payoff. I wanted the audience to hear the payoff.
Well, let's hear the payoff.
The payoff of the joke is actually, it said on the top of the tin, pierce and stand in boiling water.
Clement Freud, you actually challenged a
Yes.
time back. What was your challenge?
A repetition of returning.
When was he returning? Oh, he returned. That's right. He
Throw
returned.
your mind back.
He returned.
I think
That's
you'll
right.
find the word was not returned on each occasion. There was a return, a returned, and a returning.
No, returning.
And I wish
I
to
think you-
state quite categorically that that's an utter lie on my part.
Well, this
It's
person
all right.
kept
I know it
coming
was
back.
a lie, but it was. I remember he did return to his convenience 3 times very rapidly. It must have been the beans that he pierced with the thing.
I'm not a
Anyway,
regular member of the programme.
I don't think he was standing in the boiling water and it was running around. Anyway, Clement Freud, you have 32 seconds on what I wrote on a wall starting now.
It seems to me that the subject, what I wrote on a wall, is an invitation to indulge in obscenities or graffiti, of which one is personally the author. And as I have never done that sort of thing and disapprove very much of defacers of walls generally, and obscenic authors in particular, it seems to me that the best thing I can do is sing a short
Barry
song.
Cryer has challenged you.
I would challenge the definition of the word obscenic.
So would I, but I wouldn't be able to answer it.
It's... does that come under the heading of deviation to challenge the inclusion of a
What about
non-existent word?
Mester? What about obscenic? Do you think that's a good
yes,
word?
it's there.
It's there. Oh, so I'm sorry. Yeah, Mester's ruled you out. I'm terribly
Oh.
sorry, Barry. Clement Freud.
And yet-
Obscenic is with you. I mean, I'm sorry.
What's the difference between obscene and obscenic? Nick, I suppose.
Good.
Peter, you don't say much when you have the subject, but what you say when you haven't is well worth every moment of it.
Are you going to answer the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was an incorrect challenge, so Clement Freud has another point, and he has 8 seconds on what I wrote on a wall starting now.
Grasping a piece of chalk and remembering what I ought to do, I did approach this wall and write upon it the word dash.
At the end of that round, Clement Freud has got a commanding lead. Derek Nimmo, would you begin the next round? The subject following that one is what I read on a wall. Would you like to tell us something about that subject in 60 seconds, starting now?
I read on this particular wall, no parking. Another one said Lexham Gardens. One said Whitehall Place. I remember a wall in Yugoslavia that had something on it.
It became incoherent. I happen to speak perfect Yugoslavian. And I know that he stumbled over the second syllable.
Yes. And I would have thought that his accent was definitely from,
was a Croat.
no, it wasn't Croat. No, it was more Dalmatian or Hepsagonia.
Serbo-Croat, wasn't it?
No, Hepsagonia, definitely.
Yes, well,
And so, for that, I definitely award you a point for a correct challenge, and you have 45 seconds, Peter, on what I have read on a wall starting now.
Well, the door of this toilet was about 9 inches off the floor, and it said on the wall, "Beware of the limbo dancers." That's,
Derek Nimmo's challenge.
Well, actually, a deviation, because he said he read it on the door, he didn't read it on the wall.
I don't mind where he read it, he deserves the point. And he gets a point for a wrong challenge, and he carries on with 25 seconds on what I read on the wall, Peter, starting now.
and in another place, I saw on the wall, "The Romans came to Shrewsbury in 54 AD, and damn all has happened since." And it was signed by an American serviceman who gave his number and address. I remember that quite distinctly. Now,
Peter not so much kept going. He gave you very good value, so he didn't have to keep going much. You laughed so much, he was able to pause in between. And Clement, we come back to you again, and the subject is what I have not thought of. This is the last subject. Would you start now? 60 seconds now.
Barbecue jelly eels, I think I haven't thought of for a very long time. You would have to catch the things which sting, and then...
Derek Nimmo's challenged.
Hesitation.
I would agree, Derek, and you have what I have not thought of, and there are 49 seconds left starting now.
I suppose really because he invented the steam engine that one doesn't often think of him these days, because it's been superseded by diesel. And therefore, James Watt somehow has passed into oblivion, into the history books, and one doesn't quite attend to him in the same way.
Barry Cry.
I can't quite define it, but passing into oblivion and the history books at one and the same time, does that come under deviation or...
Definitely deviation.
Utter confusion or...
Confusion. Deviation. It could not be both. I agree, Barry. 34 seconds with you now on what I've not thought of, starting now.
I have not thought of shoe trees for months, nay, years. Shoe trees strike me as a banal subject.
Derek Nimmo...
Which I felt so strongly about I had to mention twice. It was so banal. I wanted to stress its banality.
Yes, but I'm afraid the banality has alas given Derek a point, and there are 26 seconds on what I have not thought of, Derek, starting now.
Which grubs seldom pass through my mind these days, nor do power slugs, which are green things that sometimes one finds in New Zealand lurking under the sand. And I haven't, you know, even had the tiniest glimmer of a thought about those particular things for these many months. It is strange, isn't it, somehow, that the tinier creatures of this world do
Peter Jones
pass...
has challenged.
hesitation.
I would agree, Peter, and you have 6 seconds on what I've not thought of, starting now.
I haven't thought about the pier at Scarborough for several weeks.
Well, that was a very nice subject on which to finish this particular edition of Just a Minute. You probably guessed the result. This week's winner, once again, Clement Freud. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute. From all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch. present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Peter Jones and Sheila Hancock in just a minute. And as the minute wells fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Hello and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And we're pleased to welcome back Sheila Hancock, who did so well last time that she was here. Once again, I'm going to ask them to speak, if they can, for just a minute on some subject that I will give them without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject on the card. And let us begin the show this week with Peter Jones. Peter, can you talk on the subject of a chairman's job?
No.
Now, tell us a few inside things as you keep going for 60 seconds, starting now.
Well, I do realize more than ever that it is an extremely difficult job.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course, one has sometimes better people on the panel than others. Occasionally, they tend to talk all at the same time and laugh and make excuses for not being able to think of anything to say. On the other hand, it does...
Derek Nimmo, challenge.
Hesitation.
I would agree, Derek. You have a point for a correct challenge. You take over the subject of a chairman's job. There are 37 seconds starting now.
One goes back to the fair city of Bath in the 18th century, Bonash and Brummel, all those wonderful people, and sees the chairman lifting up the sedan chairs, one at the front carrying two poles and the other at the back, with the flamboys in front, striding along to the pump room or the assembly ditto, and there, perhaps, taking the waters and putting down these lovely CHAIRSs. Sometimes in programs like this, one has today what one calls a chairman loosely. In fact, we have on this particular one a great benign oaf who sits up there.
The whistle tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking then gets the extra point, and Derek Nimmo's oaf gets him a bonus point, and he's taken the lead. In fact, he's the only one who scored in that round. Kenneth, your turn to begin. The subject, a very good one for this week, playing Just a Minute without Clement Freud. Can you talk on that subject for just a minute, starting now?
Well, it closely resembles, I've never stopped telling him, Edward VII. And the difficulty of playing without Clement Freud is that I cannot sit next to the aforementioned monarch. Now, doing so fills me with the splendor of a past era, the Edwardian, and to a certain extent, Mr. Freud is reminiscent of such a period in our life. It was a time we could all enjoy good food and lovely clothes. People dressed up much more than they do now, and of course servants were plentiful, and you could...
Sheila Hancock has challenged.
He said people as though everybody lived like that. Well, they didn't. A lot of people didn't have any food at all in that period.
Yeah, but I mean, to go into all that is to go into a social commentary.
Well, you're
on
going
life.
into it.
We haven't got time for all that. We're just making one or two
The
passing
subject,
remarks.
actually, I'm surprised. I disagree with Sheila's challenge, so you get a point for an incorrect challenge. And you keep
Thank
the
you. A
subject.
very good chairman. Quite right.
Yeah.
Very good. Here.
But before someone challenges you, Freud, let me warn you, the subject is playing Just a Minute without Clement Freud, not
Yes.
the Edwardian
Yes, that's
period.
right, darling. Yes, I'm with you, darling. Don't worry.
All right, lovely. Keep going if you can for another 18 seconds, starting now.
Clement Freud always exudes, so to speak, an atmosphere of well-being. On the other hand...
Derek Nimmo,
He
challenge.
doesn't exude an atmosphere of well-being. I've never seen such a great big gloomy slug in all my life. Well-being. Miserable. Great bloodhound features sitting there week after week.
But I'm not going to judge on the personality of one of our absent friends.
Put it to the audience.
I'm going to put it to the audience. Because after all, some people might agree with Kenneth that Clement Freud's quiet and somewhat lugubrious personality does exude a feeling of well-being. If you agree with what Kenneth just said about Clement Freud's well-being, you cheer for Kenneth, but if you agree with Derek Nimmo, you boo for him, and you all do it together now. Derek, I think they're with you. And against Freud and against... So, Derek, you have a point and a correct challenge. 10 seconds. Playing just a minute without Clement Freud starting now.
Playing just a minute without Clement Freud is absolutely delightful. A great dark shadow has got out of my life. No longer do I have to look at that miserable beard and those tiny sea eyes.
Derek kept going again then with more ruderies. This time about Clement Freud. Last time it was about me. Derek, it's with you to start.
Oh.
So would you take the subject now of rubies? And talk on it for just a minute if you can, starting now.
I've known many Rubies in my time, but I think first of all of Ruby Miller, former Gaiety girl, this great Edwardian beauty. I had a letter from an old Air Force officer, a gallant gentleman, who had visited her when she was playing The Little Bit of Fluff at the Criterion Theatre in 1915. He was going to France.
Peter Jones, a chap.
Little Bit of Fluff was at the Ambassador's Theatre.
How do you know?
Well, I have a sort of encyclopedic mind regarding some of these shows, and
you see how you can say something with enough
photographic
confidence
memory,
in it.
and of course, there's no question about it.
Peter.
Yes.
We'll give you a point for a very good try because it was a wonderful bit of bluff. And Derek, you still have rubies, and you have 37 seconds starting now.
And Ruby gave him a pair of her silk stockings, which he tied to the stays of his aeroplane and flew it all over the enemy country for the rest of the war.
Kenneth Williams.
Hesitation there,
Yes,
I'm afraid.
Kenneth, you have the point for a correct challenge. You have 28 seconds on rubies starting now.
They are very precious gems and have adorned the neck of many a beautiful woman. And the other thing to be said about the aforesaid jewel, rubies, is that they also take part in the mechanism of watches. Now then, I've seen these clocks, you see, with these rubies in them, and it's really remarkable the way they glisten.
Well, I can only assume that Kenneth kept going till the whistle went because I couldn't hear a word he was saying. Kenneth, you got a point for speaking or mouthing when the whistle went. And you are now in second place, only 1 point behind our leader, Derek Nimmo. Sheila, will you begin the next round, please? The subject is hanging out the washing. Can you talk about that simple subject for 60 seconds, starting now?
Strangely enough, this is something that I do with enormous pleasure now that I live in the country, because I have an excuse to stand outside and still be working. I lift up my basket full of lovely, clean linen, and out I go into the garden. This beautiful, fresh, tangy, whiffy air hits me in the face. I get out the clothes pegs that I have bought from the local gypsy, and I lift up my husband's shirt and Ellie Jane's dresses, which now, instead of being smutty and polluted, are pristine and lovely. And I put them...
Derek Nimmo, challenge.
Repetition of lovely.
Yes, your washing was lovely much earlier on.
It was a nice picture, though, wasn't it, for
It
a
was
moment?
beautiful. We all want to go
that.
hang out our washing now.
Yeah.
The whiffy air appealed to me. I like that.
Hanging out the washing, Derek. 16 seconds, starting now.
That phrase, for me, will always remind me of Britain's finest hour, the dark days of the early part of the war. We'll hang out the washing on the Siegfried line, if the ditto thingamabob is still there.
And what was your challenge, Peter?
Well, I anticipated repetition.
I thought you were going to say repetition of ditto.
Well, he said...
Yeah, it's all right. No, he got out of it. You anticipated. Bad luck, Peter. Point to Derek. 4 seconds left. Hanging out the washing, Derek, starting.
Out I go, my clothes pegs in my hand.
Derek increased his lead at the end of that round, and Peter Jones begins the next round. And the subject, Peter, is round robins.
Oh,
Can you talk on them for just a minute, starting now?
Round robins appear at Christmas time, usually.
Kenneth challenge.
Hesitation. He was laughing while he was speaking.
No, I wasn't laughing.
You can laugh while you speak.
I'm
as
not
long as
having
you-
that. If people are going to laugh and speak at the same time, we're all going to be in cloud cuckoo land. You could do anything like that.
Well, as long as you keep going, you can play this game in Cloud Cuckoo Land, and half the time we are, I think. But the audience seem to enjoy it, so Peter has a point and 55 seconds to continue on round robins, starting now.
And on cards with messages which people send to each other, they have red breasts during the winter months, but in the summer the colour changes.
Deviation. The cards that people send to each other in the winter months have red breasts. What's he on about?
I think the round robins appear on them.
The robins have the red breast. I think he established that quite clearly to my mind. But
Well, if it was clear to
but you could
Nicholas,
have had
I think
him.
everyone understands it.
I could have had him on the fact that their breasts are still red in the summer. They don't change
Well, I
colour.
was
They
about to
do
that.
change colour.
They don't.
They don't.
They do. They're practically indistinguishable from sparrows in the summer.
Round robins is still with you, and there are 47 seconds left, starting...
There are also
now.
these messages that people send.
Sheila Hancock.
We've had messages.
No, we haven't.
The lady in the audience just said so.
She's not playing just a minute.
We did.
It's going to be a fine thing if all the audience start challenging us.
Truly, Nick. He
Yes,
said,
I did say.
he
I must
said-
admit, I did say.
Well, all right,
messages
you
earlier.
did. There are 45 seconds for you, Sheila, on round robins, starting now.
I have 2 round robins that visit me on my clothesline. And very attractive they are, which is another reason why I like hanging out the washing. Because I say, hello, round robins, and how are you today? Is your breast fading?
Sheila deserves a bonus for that wonderful line. We've got to give her one for that, but Kenneth challenged before that.
Deviation, of course. Subject's round robins, not hanging out the washing. We've already had that.
Kenneth, she did repeat the word washing, so you have a point and 33
You didn't
seconds.
challenge me on that.
Yes, I did. Repetition. I said repetition was my challenge.
You didn't.
I did. Now,
washing.
look here, Sheila. We cannot have people arguing with the chair.
33
where
seconds,
she
Kenneth,
lives.
on round robins, starting now.
Round robins are so called because no human being has yet lived to see a square one. I have to pause there. I haven't really stopped talking, but I have to pause because the audience laughter there interrupted me.
Sheila
My natural flow was there.
Yeah, all right, Derek's challenge as well.
Repetition of natural flow.
Kenneth, you have 19 seconds to continue on round robins, starting now.
Well, I don't really want to continue on terribly, but on the other hand, I feel incumbent upon me.
Right, if he doesn't want to, let me have it.
All right, Sheila. 7 seconds on round robin, starting now.
Robin Ray, however, is decidedly not round.
Peter Jones is challenged.
Robin Ray is not round, she says herself, so it's not talking about
No,
round robins.
Robins, it's devious. Perfectly well done.
Oh, that's a good one. There's a very good one. That's good one. You're very well on the ball.
And you have 1.5 seconds on round robins, starting now.
Very nasty little birds they are.
Kenneth, your turn to begin. The subject that Ian Messiter's thought of for you, Capability Brown. Knowing your interest in historical personalities, would you talk about him for just a minute, starting now?
Well, his real name was Lancelot, and he laid out these gardens at Blenheim Palace. Well, this fellow was a duke, and he said, I'd like to brighten it up a bit, and a few bridges and lakes, the odd ornamental bush. He said, nice to have that, and it. He said, well, all right. He said, I'll do it naturally, so that nothing artificial, so to speak, should intrude. And thus he was known for the naturalistic landscape garden, as opposed to the formal or artificial one, so popular in the other period, which we were discussing, dealing with, of course, Louis of...
Derek Nimmo, you challenge.
Hesitation.
Hesitation, deviation, and
I did say his real name was Lancelot.
Yes, I know. I can't give you a bonus point for that. Sorry. And nor will his descendants. Derek, you have the subject and a point and 17 seconds on capability, Brown, starting now.
He was very lucky, I think, to find himself during his formative years working at the Great Garden in Stowe under William Kent, perhaps underrated as a landscape gardener. And there he found for himself the first time he was able to make a hard ditto, if you see what I mean, because you can't say the second word.
Peter Jones, a challenge.
I don't think he should be allowed to say ditto.
Quite right.
Yeah.
Very good point. Very
Well
good
done,
point.
Peter.
Quite good.
Once again, got in with 1.5 seconds to go, starting now.
His brother was Inability Brown, who cultivated...
Well, I'm glad you got it.
He cultivated window boxes.
I'm glad you got in, Peter, if only to hear that last remark of yours. It's taken you into second place now, only 1 point behind our leader, Derek Nimmo. And Derek, your turn to begin. Oh, this is a lovely subject that Ian's thought of, Sheilas.
Oh.
And I believe we have 1 or 2 Australians in the audience, haven't we? Well, too good. Well, here we go then. The subject, Sheilas, the 60 seconds you can talk on it now, Derek, starting now.
Apart from my splendid neighbour sitting next to me, Sheila does, in fact, conjure up for me the sight of those wonderful beaches in the Antipodes, those great bronze Sheilas with their round robins throbbing on Bondi Beach. How brilliant!
And Kenneth Williams says challenge.
I was challenging on account of something I've now forgotten.
It was those lovely round robins that...
Oh, yes, that's right, deviation. They have nothing to do with Sheilas. That's what I was going to say.
I think Derek made a very good point for saying that they're very much an integral part of these lovely Sheilas that he sees out in the Antipodes. 45 seconds, Derek, on Sheilas, starting now.
Drinking their tubes of beer and they're eating their pavlova cake. Gosh, Sarah...
Peter Jones.
You don't drink tubes of beer.
Yes, you do in Australia.
Cans
Yes, you
of
do.
beer.
You
That's what
drink
they-
the beer, but not
No,
the
but you
cube.
drink a glass of beer, you don't drink the glass, do you, great clot? I told you was a great clot.
I will put it to the superior judgment and wisdom of our audience, because I'm obviously quite incapable.
No, I will retract. I'll take it back. I wish I'd never mentioned the word.
40 seconds for you, Derek, on Sheila, starting now.
And then, of course, there's Sheila Hancock. To my privilege to know her for these many years. And what a beautiful woman she has become. Mind you, she was a lovely girl. How lovely Sheila, I can tell you.
Peter Jones, a challenge.
How dare you?
Too lovely. She can't be too lovely. How dare you?
Peter, correct challenge that time. 30 seconds for you on Sheila's, starting now.
Well, I don't think this word is always very pleasant in Australia. I don't believe that the people there...
Kenneth Williams, a challenge.
Deviation, this word, which I assumed was a Christian name, is now being used to me in very many senses, and I would like to be enlightened. What is it all about?
In Australia, a girl is often referred to as a Sheila.
What kind of girl?
I think Peter Jones was about to tell us. So let
I'm
him
sorry.
carry
Well,
on,
do
and,
go on, love. I'm ever so sorry, love.
there are 23 seconds left, starting now.
Well, I haven't had a great deal of personal experience of this, you understand, but I do believe that it was rather old-fashioned, and the unsavory people who did refer to girls in this particular way were usually indicating that they were...
Sheila Hancock.
Repetition of girls.
Well, we need it for the explanation, dear. How are we going to find out?
A correct challenge to you, Sheila, because you can't repeat the words. And there are 5 seconds for you on Sheila's, starting now.
I happen to know many girls with the Christian name of Sheila. I think it must have been a very...
Sheila Hancock got the bonus point for speaking when the whistle went. At the end of that round, she's equal with Kenneth in second place, behind our 2 equal leaders, Derek Nimmo and Peter Jones. And Sheila, it's your turn to begin. The subject, what is expected? That's it. Some of the audience laughed then because Sheila is actually expecting a baby, so she has just a minute to talk about it, starting now.
What I expect is either a little boy or a girl. Hopefully, because otherwise I would be pretty surprised. And it It is a lovely time to be living when you are waiting for this great lump to disappear in front of you. And it means that after that I won't have ribald comments from the rest of the panel, which I have had quite a few of today. Not necessarily during the program, but before. However, everybody expects something of life, and I think you should go through wanting the best. Often we expect the worst, which is stupid because then it very often happens. I get up every morning and I try to say to myself, today is going to be the best day of my...
Oh, bad luck, Kenneth.
Well, it was 2 days.
I know, yes.
Today, I say.
Today is going to be the best day. Oh, I see what you mean. Today is different today. Oh, you're right. Oh, I'm ever so sorry. Oh, you're absolutely right. Oh, I withdraw the challenge. I withdraw it.
You have a point, Sheila, for an incorrect challenge.
How much longer have I got to go on?
You've only got another 7 seconds. You've been going very, very well on what is expected starting now.
I will try to make it.
Repetition of try.
Yes, you tried too hard. Bad luck.
Yeah.
Often happens when their flow gets interrupted, then they can't get going again. 5 seconds for you, Derek, on what is expected starting now.
What is expected on this program is that Brown should be capable, Robin should be round, the washing should be hung out.
Those last 2 points that Derek gained, he has put himself back in the lead again at the end of the round. Peter's only 2 points behind, though, and Sheila and Kenneth aren't far behind that. And Peter, your turn to begin. The subject is moon dust. Can you talk on moon dust for just a minute, starting now?
What's happened to it? We haven't heard anything in the newspapers, on the radio or television about this substance which caused so much trouble and expense and the time they took getting it and bringing it back in the capsule, and then it was advertised as being sent to various universities all over the world, studied in laboratories by scientists, and I hope that there would be some advantage to the human race in all this fuss and guffuffle that went on. But as far as I'm concerned, nothing has happened. The quality of the bread has steadily got worse. It still takes ages to get from Oxford Circus to Piccadilly. And why don't they do something about it?
Derek Nimmo's challenge.
Deviation, I think it was ever expected that moon dust would improve the underground system.
I think he made his point that such a wonderful discovery could really change our lives, and it's had little effect on Peter Jones's. So, Peter, you keep going with 14 seconds on moon dust, starting now.
I'd like them to start analysing it and really finding out.
Kenneth Williams.
Deviation. He's told us they've gone to 100 universities and laboratories, so obviously they are analysing it.
Well done, Kenneth. It was the correct challenge, and Kenneth has 9 seconds on moon dust, starting now.
This is sprinkled in order to kill the wild elephants. Now, the only way to do it...
Peter Jones's challenge.
Well, it isn't. It's absolute rubbish. Of course it isn't.
No, you don't sprinkle to kill the wild elephants.
Not allowed to kill wild elephants anyway.
Peter, you have another point, and you have 4.5 seconds to continue on moon dust, starting now.
If they really worked at it, these people...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Repetition of worked.
He did say worked before, so you have a point, and you have 1.5 seconds on moon dust, starting now.
Well, I would put the moon dust in a little dustbin and sweep it under the...
Well, we have, alas, no more time, as I warned you just a moment ago. And just to give you the final score, Kenneth Williams and Sheila Hancock finished equal in 3rd place. They were a few points behind Peter Jones, who was, as you must have realized, 2 points behind this week's winner, once again, Derek Nimmo. Well, we hope you've enjoyed listening to Just a Minute. From all of us, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by John Lloyd.
We present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud and Barry Cryer in just a minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Hello, welcome to Just a Minute. And once again, I'm going to ask our four keen and bright panelists if they can talk for just a minute on some subject that I will give them without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject which is on the card in front of me. And according to how well they do that, they will gain points or their opponents will. And we will begin the show this week with Kenneth Williams. Kenneth, are you ready to start? The subject is how to celebrate. Can you talk about that for just a minute, starting now?
This would depend on where you were doing it. Obviously, in Ulaanbaatar, you would drink the kumis, which is made from fermented mare's milk. And the population has doubled in the last year, so you can imagine the effects of that. We should all be having it here. On the Thames, of course, it's the old black pudding and...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of course.
These are parts of speech, dear. We're not going to start all of that. If you're going to make that one of those evenings, we're going to be here all night. I mean, it's ridiculous you
Well,
go
it's
on.
not going to be one of those evenings, but don't repeat, of course, again, Kenneth. Keep the subject, keep going, and you have 43 seconds starting now.
Myself, of course, I always send.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Well, he did repeat, of course.
Yes, I'm
again.
afraid this time I have to give it again.
It's going to be nasty like that. I'm going to do it for the rest of the evening. I can tell you that much for nothing. When do they start? Just wait till they start with their bits of rubbish they come out with and all this repetition they do. I'll just come in on everything, so don't worry yourself, mate. You'll find you've bitten off more than you can chew, dearie. Yes. Yes.
I wasn't particularly worried. I thought I'd be
I'm all
rather
the way from
generous
Great
to you
Portland
last
to
time.
make a fool, you know.
Kenneth, I have to be fair. Derek Nimmo challenge. He gets a point for a correct challenge. He has 41 seconds to continue on how to celebrate, starting now.
Gosh, there are all sorts of ways of celebrating. What an evocative expression it is. For me, anyway. How to celebrate. What a lovely thought. Yes, now, I start off generally with a bumper.
Barry Cryer has challenged.
Creeping hesitation. It was setting in.
It was setting in,
Yes.
I agree. I don't think it had actually set.
Right.
It was still wobbling a bit, like
Right.
the jelly that I usually make. Barry, so I've got to be fair, and Derek gets a point for that.
Is this a new thing?
27 seconds, Derek, on how to celebrate, starting now.
What ho! I shout, and away I go with gin and whiskey and scotch and vodka and bottles of lemonade and tonic too, because that's very important to water it down a bit, and holly and mistletoe and plum pudding.
Kenneth Williams.
There were 6 ands.
All right, we give it to you, Kenneth, and you have 17 seconds on how to celebrate, starting now.
Well, it's very difficult for me because I had earlier on quite a lot.
Derek challenge. Yes, I'm afraid, Kenneth, you do find it more different than the rest that once you've been interrupted to get going again. I do recognise that. But I have to give it back to Derek, and there are 13 seconds on how to celebrate, Derek, starting now.
Sitting one night in the Via Veneto, I saw coming towards me a beautiful maiden with dark hair and an olive skin. Let's go and celebrate, I said to her, and we wandered through...
The whistle tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking that moment gains the extra point. On this occasion, it was Derek Nimmo, so he has taken a very strong lead at the end of that round. Clement Freud, will you begin the next round? The subject is the right moment to sound my buzzer. Something we can all talk about in this show, but will you try and talk about it now for just a minute, starting now?
The right moment to sound my buzzer in just a minute would be when somebody says, of course. But of course, as he only said it twice, it would be considered the wrong moment. But if a hesitant creep begins to deviate, then again hesitation would not apply. These are the rules which the chairman, aided and assisted by Mr. Ian Messiter, who thought of this astonishing way of wasting half an hour twice a week and even more frequently, decided in his wisdom that he would perpetrate a wholesale
Hesitation, I thought.
Yes, he couldn't think what he must have perpetrated, so he hesitated, and Kenneth, you got in first. You have the subject of 0.21 seconds on the right moment to sound my buzzer, starting now.
The right moment to sound my buzzer occurs endlessly, and yet, in my charitable foresight, I do not do it, lacking that awful malice which seems to possess so many players of this game. I am chivalrous. I am charming. I just let them get away with it. Murder, you see what I mean?
And talking about getting away with it, they let you get away with it. I am 3 times, and you're now in the lead with Derek Nimmo at the end of that round. Clement Freud and Barry Cryer have yet to score, and Barry Cryer, your turn to begin. Barry, when someone scratched my new car, can you talk on that subject for just a minute, starting now?
I was intensely irritated the first time someone scratched my new car. Firstly, it wasn't itching, and secondly, I had just purchased it at great expense. And coming out of the house, I viewed an enormous laceration along the side of the near side front.
Clement Freud.
Repetition of side.
Yes, the
side. But near side.
Near side. I said near side the second time.
You see, it's one word, near side.
Thank you very much, Kenneth.
Kenneth, it's usually the chairman's job to say that, but thank you very much.
Well, I thought you were having trouble with your diction, so I was helping.
Barry, you have an incorrect challenge. You have a point. You keep the subject. There are 42 seconds on when someone scratched my new car, starting now.
This was a scar, the like of which I had never seen upon the surface of an automobile. I turned to my wife. Doris, I cried, which astonished the lady in question, as her name is Teresa. What?
James Williams is challenged.
Well, I mean, this is deviation. How dare he talk to his wife by a woman's other name?
But I think if you were so shattered by seeing a scratch on your new car, you might well call your wife by any name that comes
How
to mind.
true, O King.
28 seconds to continue with the subject, Barry, starting now.
What is it, my love, she quoth. The car is scratched, I riposted. Never, she cried, and rushed out into the drive. The very portion of tarmac upon which she had been prosecuted for speeding only the week before. Wiping the mist for
Kenneth Williams, a
deviation. How can she have been arrested for speeding in her own drive?
I didn't say arrested, I said prosecuted.
Well, how could she be prosecuted in her own drive?
No, she ran down the drive to the car, which was in the highway.
Nicholas knows.
I think it's all highly devious rubbish, don't you?
British rubbish.
You think it's rubbish, isn't it?
I think you created a very clear picture, in spite of his shot state, of where the car was. Not in the drive, but in the highway.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Barry, you
Parsons.
continue with when someone scratched my new car. 10 seconds starting
May
now.
I say how marvellously I think you do this job?
May I say, Barry, very well I think you're doing as well. You have 8 seconds to continue after one. When someone scratched my car, starting now.
I viewed the offending portion of the automobile's body.
Derek Nimmo.
Repetition of automobile.
Yes, I can't let that one go, Barry.
That's true.
4 seconds, Derek, on when someone scratched my new car, starting now.
When someone scratched my new car. Who buzzed?
Clement Freud did.
Hesitation.
Yes, indeed. There are 2 seconds for you on when someone starting now.
When someone scratched my new car,
Clement Freud was then speaking when the whistle went, got that extra point, and a very interesting situation. He's in 4th place, 1 point behind Barry Cryer and Kenneth Williams, equal in 2nd place, so therefore Clement must be in 3rd place. Derek Nimmo still in the lead, 1 point ahead of them.
You see why it's an interesting situation. It's just a load of marks, that's all. It's not an interesting situation, is it?
I'm trying to whip up a little enthusiasm amongst our listeners. Derek, it's your turn to begin. The subject is pros and cons. Would you talk about them, or on that subject, if you can, just a minute, starting now?
If you wouldn't mind, I think I'll deal with them separately and start with the last one, cons. Because, you know, you can con people in all sorts of ways. Standing in Berwick Market the other day, I saw some people playing Chase the Ace.
Clement Freud.
repetition of people.
Yes, you did say people twice.
You can con people. I saw some people.
Yes. Thank you very much. Have you heard it so well. Why didn't you buzz?
I wouldn't do that kind of thing. I've not got that sort of instinct, you know, and I can't just cash in on people in that fashion.
45 seconds for you, Clement, on pros and cons, starting now.
Prose is a means of telling people...
Kenneth Williams.
Well, I mean, this was just all juddering to a halt.
Yes, so it was hesitation.
I
And you
hadn't
have a
started
point and a
yet.
correct challenge.
I hadn't got into
Oh,
it.
shut your mouth.
He doesn't say shut your row to you when you say...
Well, of course he doesn't. He's not got my vocabulary, has he?
Your ready turn of phrase, Kenneth. There are 39 seconds for you to continue on pros and cons, starting now.
This, of course, is the shortening of the argument for as opposed to the one against. And it is something which is practiced regularly in the upper chamber and the lower place in the Palace of Westminster, where my friend sits quite regularly. He's always there, bobbing up and down, trying to catch the eye of the speaker. This is one of his usual...
Derek Nimmo.
Hesitation.
Yes, he didn't catch the eye that time. There are 14 seconds on pros and cons, Derek, starting now.
Every morning one is faced with pros and cons. Should one go out with one's welly boots on and one's raincoat? No, I say, because the sun is shining brightly from a blue sky. But then again, a little bit later on, the rain might hit it at down.
Once again, Derek Nimmo was speaking when the whistle went, got that extra point, and he is now in the lead at the end of the round. Kenneth, the subject is Venetian Doges. Can you talk about them? I'm sure Ian Messer, knowing your interest in history, has thought of this specially for you. You have just a minute, starting now.
These were elected dukes to rule the oligarchy of Venice until about 1300, when it became the Council of Ten. One of the most important of the Doges was unquestionably Daniele. I stayed in the palazzo, which is named after him and has a magnificent ceiling, which is painted by Titian, and I sat under it listening to a very eminent Venetian gentleman explaining to me about the erection of the place on wooden piles. I didn't know that's how Venice was supported. He said, oh yes, you see, these refugees come to flee from the barbarians and stuck these poles up in the water, on which they built their houses and became the absolute queen of the sea. I said, never. He said, moved all the way, because of the overland route through the caravans via Istanbul, bringing all those spices and rare juices and unguents.
Clement Freud has challenged.
Deviation, he's got a very long way away from Venetian Doges.
But they were bringing all these rare spices and juices to the Venetian Doges, as far as I could see. And I think he's only got 1 second left. We'll be generous and let him continue for 1 second on the subject with which he started, starting now.
The Doges of Venice, well...
Kenneth, speaking when the whistle went, got the extra point, and while we were a little generous on the challenge, he has now taken the lead with Derek Nimmo at the end of the round. And Clement Freud, your turn to begin. The subject, nodding through.
What?
Nodding through.
Nodding?
Nodding, yes, that's what Ian Mester's thought of. Nodding. Nodding, N-O-D-D-I-N-G, through. Just a minute if you can, starting now.
What may well be my problem is that I keep nodding through subjects like Venetian Doges, on which I actually wanted to speak because I was once asked to do a commercial about Doges' food from Venice.
Revolution Doges.
Yes, because that's not the subject on the card. Nodding through is the subject on the card, not Venetian Doges. So you repeated it. Derek got in first. 45 seconds on nodding through. Derek starting.
What a lovely title for a song. We'll go nodding through, don't know where, don't know where now.
Repetition of don't,
yes.
But more was coming.
But you got there before he did, so you have 40 seconds on nodding through. Clement starting now.
Nodding through is a very odd parliamentary practice. And what happens is that if somebody at Westminster is too ill to go through a division lobby but finds himself in the confines of the palace, the chief whip whether he be Conservative, Labour or Liberal, is allowed to go up to the person keeping a record and nod the person through, whereby his name is added to a list and the party which he represents is credited with an extra vote. It's a very strange and odd thing. People have done it when they've...
Derek
Revolution of odd. Odd practice, odd.
Yes, the odd thing and the odd practice.
It's a very little word.
A very significant and potent word, and 5 seconds left for nodding through with Derek starting now.
And the Unionist Party also has a whip, and I'm very sorry.
Clement Freud, challenge.
Deviation, they don't have a whip.
You get a point for a correct challenge. You take over the subject. There are 3 seconds for you on nodding through starting now.
The Speaker rises in his chair, says...
Barry, we're back with you to start. The subject is getting away with it. Can you talk on that for just a minute, starting now?
The very expression getting away with it prompts in my mind feelings of guilt. One has memories of occasions when I personally would admit to things having been...
Kenneth Williams, a challenge.
Why does he keep looking on the floor and looking away? Talking to the microphone, why does he keep looking away?
He's just showing how his sense of
I thought he was
one-upmanship...
cheating. I thought it was deviating. I thought he wasn't playing the game properly by speaking directly into the microphone, as I always do.
Except for the 150 times in every show you turn and face the audience and speak to them.
Oh, well, that's because I've got chums out there.
The whole audience, in fact.
Well, this is victimisation. I don't think
no,
I can go on.
I disagree with his challenge.
My flow's gone now. I mean, I just can't continue.
I didn't know you brought her with you. Barry, you have a point for an incorrect challenge. You have 47 seconds on getting away with it starting now.
The essence of getting away with it is to create the illusion, the...
Clement Freud.
Deviation.
Why?
He was speaking into the microphone.
A good challenge, but incorrect. 43 seconds on getting away with it, Barry, starting now.
Getting away with it can, in fact, be extremely difficult when looking ahead, speaking into microphones and seeing one's 2 opponents across the stage. One's 2 protagonists. I hesitated because I realised I'd repeated myself, thereby commit. Whatever he says is right.
Yes. Well, what is the challenge, Clement?
Just whatever, and I'm right.
He didn't repeat whatever.
No, once, and he hesitated.
No, he didn't repeat once.
Yes, he did.
Oh, you see, I heard 2s. And 2 protagonists. There are 32 seconds for you, Clement, on getting away with it starting now.
Getting away with it is something you achieve when nobody catches you performing the act which you wanted to carry out and not be caught.
And Kenneth Williams is
I thought it was a hesitation, the whole thing.
Now, you just got Barry there for talking about one-upmanship. Now, you were doing it very definitely, Clement, there, and that's, by the way...
What business have you got looking at what I'm doing? Why don't you mind your own business and share the game instead of peeking round the corner and
I have to listen to every...
I've never seen like I've got eyes at the back of the head, have I, or something?
You're going to get the point, but I have to listen to every word you say as well as watch you all, because I must explain to the listeners that the reason the audience in the studio were laughing is because you were tickling Clement Freud up the spine while he was trying to speak. Try to keep going in just a minute under those circumstances with Kenneth Williams, of all people, tickling you up the spine is extremely difficult. But Kenneth, he did hesitate, and he hasn't complained, so I give you a point and the subject, and there are 19 seconds on getting away with it, which you've just done.
That's what he was.
Starting
spine.
Sorry, did we miss a good point there, Clement?
No, I just wondered what he was tickling me up the spine.
We'll leave that to your imagination, because I don't want to get any deeper. 19 seconds, starting now.
Who's got 19 seconds?
Kenneth Williams. I just said that you'd got away with it, and now you have the subject of getting away with it. 19 seconds, starting now.
I buzzed. It's my
Oh,
night.
I know, but you asked a question. We're going back to the 19 seconds.
I challenged.
What?
Oh, I don't know what's happening. I know my little light went on.
All right then, the audience think that you should have it because Kenneth didn't start when I told him to start, and they feel that it was well established he should have started. So Derek, you have a point for a correct challenge, and you now have 16 seconds on getting away with it starting now.
Getting away with anything in this program is frightfully difficult because all the time you're being harassed and barracked by the other people that play the game, and it's absolutely monstrous. We come here week after 7 days, and all the time you're buzzing away. Oh, Parsons has no authority at all.
Derek Nimmo, I managed very artfully to get him worked up into a passion, so he gave tremendous value to you then. And kept going till the whistle went. He's increased his lead at the end of that round. And Derek, it's your turn to begin. The subject, breakfast. Will you talk about it for just a minute if you can, starting now?
Kedgeree and lovely croissant. And sometimes for one's petit déjeuner. Oh, I could have repeated breakfast. Yes, I can. I have done. That's all right. Fine, I'll stay with it. And Rice Krispies. I like those so much, don't you? And a mango. Very good. Chilled from the refrigerator. Scoop it out. Whack it in your own mouth. Lovely. Try it sometime.
Clement Freud.
Repetition of lovely.
Yes.
Absolutely right.
Yes.
Well listened.
And 37 seconds on breakfast with you, Clement, starting now.
Breakfast is the first meal of the day, which I always start with coffee, followed by toast, buns, butter, marmalade, but occasionally jam, and then ham, eggs, bacon, sausages, kidney, mushrooms, rolled tomatoes, kedgeree, which I'm really tremendously keen on because rice and pheasant, especially elderly bird, flaked into a white sauce and then mixed with a mixture as before and taken in huge forkfuls and shoveled down your gullet, waiting to stave off the hunger.
Well, after that breakfast of Clement Freud, you're either feeling very hungry or quite sick. But he did keep going on breakfast until the whistle went, gained the extra point. He's moved forward, so it's still quite even. We now come up to the final round with Kenneth. Your turn to begin. The subject is probability. Would you talk on that unusual subject for 60 seconds, starting now?
Well, the probability is that which is likely to happen but is not provable. The likelihood of... Hood, I said, you great fool. Likelihood, but...
What? Nimmo, what was your challenge?
Well, it was likely, but it took such a long time before he got to the hood. I passed.
Well, it was an incorrect challenge.
Thank
Kenneth.
you. Very good chairman. Nice fellow.
52 seconds, Kenneth, on probability starting now.
You might get away with it in the ladies' powder room at Port Said, but the hotel, say, Claridge, would obviously object. They'd say, what was you up to that is within the bounds of probability? And you say, no, it's just the way my coat was done up. But of course, you might not always find such liberality in pro-fascistic regimes. They take a very different view, and you've only got to hold out your stiletto, and it's regarded as a, well, a tantamount, I think.
Clement Freud.
Hesitation.
Yes, a tantamount. There are 18 seconds on probability with you, Clement, starting now.
The probability is that if you go to Portugal, especially Madrid, which is in Spain, and from there board an aeroplane for the capital city, the probability, I think I should have mentioned earlier, that you will meet a stewardess who says, fasten your...
Clement Freud, speaking when the whistle went, got the extra point. I told you a little while ago this would have to be the last round. So now I will give you the final score. Barry Cryer, returning after some absence, did...
Remained absent.
Yes, no, you did very well, Barry. You got quite a lot of points, and but you still finished, I'm afraid, in 4th place, because a lot of points were scored in this particular game. Kenneth Williams, for instance, got 10 points, and he was in 3rd place. And Derek Nimmo was in 2nd place, and he was 1 point behind this week's winner, who was Clement Freud. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute. From all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute is Nicholas Parsons. The program was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.
We present Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud, Peter Jones and Andre Melly in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And once again, I will ask 4 keen and regular competitors of our game to speak, if they can, for 60 seconds on some unlikely subject without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject on the card. And we'll begin the show this week with Andre Melly. Andre, welcome back to that 4th chair. And the subject is concealing the body. And would you talk on that? 60 seconds, starting now.
Concealing the body is not something that people go in for much these days with streakers and all that. But I conceal my body most of the time, and that's because I'm always frozen. Even as a child, I used to wear leggings, knicker linings, knickers, vests, liberty bodice.
Derek Nimmo has challenged you.
A pair of knickers.
So what is the challenge?
Repetition. Knicker lining, knicker elastic or something, knicker something. There were 2 lots of
knicker
knickers.
lining and knickers.
Quite
one is
different.
plural and the other one might be hyphenated. I don't know. It's sort of an old-fashioned thing. I'm not sure. So I disagree with your challenge. And Andre, you have a point for an incorrect challenge, so you keep the subject and you continue. There are 44 seconds left, concealing the body, starting now.
My grandmother, who would be about 110 if she were alive today, used to say, gentlemen's arrangements are not pretty. And I think that she really had a very good point there, because it's clothes that make people so sexy.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Deviation. It was her grandfather who had a very good point.
You've made a very good point, but you haven't made enough of a point to get a point. So Andre Melly keeps the subject, and there are 29 seconds on concealing the body. Andre, starting now.
Those dresses which go right up to the neck and down to your heels and then show a completely nude back. That's what I think's really attractive, don't you? And men's clothes today are so lovely.
Derek Nimmo has
Hesitation.
Yes.
Yes, I agree with the hesitation, Derek. So you have 17 seconds left. You gained a point for the right challenge. Concealing the body, starting now.
A deep freezer in Rillington Place will be an ideal place to conceal the body.
And Clement Freud got in first.
Repetition of place.
Yes, it was. And there are 11 seconds left, Clement. You've got a point. The subject, which is concealing the body, starting now.
The normal methods of concealing a body consist of shoes, socks, suspenders, pants, trousers, shirt.
Peter Jones has challenged.
You can't conceal a body with suspenders.
If you didn't
conceal a portion of the body with suspenders, and I think that's...
No, because it's already concealed if you wear trousers.
short trousers.
But he put the suspenders...
You wouldn't wear suspenders with short trousers.
But
Well, I have little
Peter,
sartorial
he
taste,
did actually put the
I can see that. But I want to get into a commanding lead, and I feel entitled to make
Peter,
this
as
protest.
chairman, I also have to try as far as possible...
But
to
is there
be fair
no
and
court of
accurate.
appeal? I mean, it's so monstrous that you're having people's whole careers depend on this sort of decision that you're making now.
I'm sorry if your whole
I don't
career's
want
been-
to appear an idiot, you know.
But he did. I was trying to say, Clement Freud put the suspenders on before the trousers, so even your further point would not be valid. You tried very hard, Peter, and we enjoyed it, but there are 2 seconds left with Clement Freud on concealing the body, starting now.
Concealing the body on the part
The end of the first round, Clement Freud, speaking when the whistle went, gained, of course, the extra point, and he has taken a very definite lead. Derek, would you take the next round? The subject is Taurus. Just a minute with you now, starting now.
Taurus the bull, a sign of the zodiac, coming from legend, of course, the great white bull They went after some old bird. What?
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of that word.
Yes.
The bull.
Yes. And Clement, a correct challenge, a point to you, and there are 52 seconds now. Taurus, starting now.
This is an astrological sign about which I know a great deal because I happen to have been born on the 24th of April and am therefore a Taurian and would be very happy to receive birthday cards next year on the appropriate date. Taurus is from the 21st of April.
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of April.
Yes, you were right, Peter. And 34 seconds on Taurus, starting now.
Taurus are what is wrong with London. There are far too many of them. All over the underground. You can't get into the museums or onto the buses, into the trains even. And on the pavements, they're rubbernecking their way past the Horse Guards Parade, Buckingham Palace, Trafalgar Square, Leicester...
Oh, dear. Andre, you challenged.
Well, I hesitate.
Yes, I'm afraid there was out the other square. Andre, you have 12 seconds now. The subject is Taurus, and you begin now.
The only Taurus I know is one of those very obnoxious, rather trendy children whose doting parents...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Deviation, she knows me.
Very good challenge. He's very quite clear he is a Taurus. So, Clement, I agree with your challenge. You have 6 seconds on the subject starting now.
Among other Taurians, Her Majesty...
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Repetition of Taurian.
Of course,
No,
Derek.
no,
And you
no.
have 4 seconds.
No,
for
no, I
Taurus.
didn't say I said Taurian. I said it makes me a Taurian earlier. This time,
What
and
did you
I was
say?
going to... Among other Taurians. And I was going to mention...
Oh, it's a quibble.
I got away
The
with
audience
Nicola.
applause tells me without any doubt they agree with Derek's challenge, and he has 4 seconds. I'll have to put it to you if there's a disagreement.
Oh, just give it to you know.
Derek, 3 seconds. Taurus, starting now.
Europa was the bird that he was after, and when he turned himself back, and he was Zeus.
At the end of that round, Derek Nimmo spoke when the whistle went. He gained the extra point. He's equal with Andre Merry in second place, but Clement Freud is still in the lead. And Clement, your turn to begin. The subject, planning. Can you talk on that now? For just a minute, starting now.
If you're planning a Taurian, it is very important to start in about August, because otherwise you wouldn't have a hope in hell of achieving it. Now, a Taurian is born...
Peter Jones is challenged.
A repetition of Taurian.
What are you saying? Why is it not correct?
I used it in the plural the first time. This time...
Well, it makes life so difficult if you play it like that.
Yes.
And boring. Rather too much bull for me.
And bully for you, Peter. I didn't hear you, that's all I can say.
Commanding lead.
I didn't hear you say it last time, so I'm going to do the same with Peter as I did with Derek Nimmo. Give him the subject and say there are 46 seconds on planning, Peter, starting now.
Planning is an interesting thing if you're going on a holiday. Very important, really, though I do tend myself to act on the spur of the moment, not poring over maps and timetables and getting on the phone to travel agents, but rather packing my little suitcase and hobbling off down the street, getting onto a bus and going I know not where, perhaps with any luck to a railway station. What time is it? And then, when I'm there, I choose one of these marvelous long conveyances driven by diesel engines, clamber aboard, having purchased a ticket beforehand, and go to some seaside resort. With any luck at all, it could be
Repetition of luck.
What did I say luck
We liked
before?
it so much. You're rotten, you spoiled it, Derek.
It's in the corner.
Anyway, I would have thought that was the absolute antithesis of planning, actually, Peter, but we loved it. But
Oh, yes,
Derek
it was,
Nimmo got
actually,
in with
yes.
1.5 seconds to go. He has a point. Ah, you rotten thing. 1.5 seconds, Derek, on planning, starting now.
I'm planning to help Peter Jones' career.
Peter Jones, it's your turn to begin. And the subject is making the whole thing worthwhile. You could probably say the same as you just said before in the last subject. But will you try and say something different and start now?
Making the whole thing worthwhile is having an effect, achieving something so that you feel at the end of it stimulated or possibly purged.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, I have to agree and tell you, Derek, that you have a point and 47 seconds on making the whole thing worthwhile starting now.
Making the whole thing worthwhile for me is helping Peter Jones' career. So I will now stop.
And Clement Freud challenge, so you have...
Well, he's beastly!
Clement Freud, what is your challenge?
Hesitation.
And you're absolutely right. And you have a point. It's correct. And there are 40 seconds on making the whole thing worthwhile starting now.
For me, making the whole thing worthwhile is receiving the approbation of the audience when I talk for 60 seconds without hesitation, deviation, or repetition on subjects of pith and interest, moment and compulsion. I open my mouth and close it, teeth flash, my eyes shine, and the laughter of the good people in the Playhouse Theatre holds me riveted to my seat as I press my button with my right hand. My left foot shakes from one side to the other, and the floor capitulates while the audience cascade.
Derek Nimmo's done it again. What's the
A
challenge?
repetition of audience. The audience play has said it.
Derek Nimmo got in with
Some
4
of us
seconds
did.
to go. Yes, some of us. Making the whole thing worthwhile, Derek, starting now.
Making the whole thing worthwhile for me is to be able to come here tonight and look at the smiling faces.
Derek Nimmo was again speaking when the whistle went. He's increased his lead at the end of that round. Clement Freud in second place, Andre Melli and Peter Jones just in third. Andre, your turn to begin. The subject is how to get some. That's what Ian Mester has thought of. We'd like you to talk on it if you can for 60 seconds starting now.
I've always found that the best way to get some, if it's in very short supply and other people want it too, is to be completely frank and open. Sooner or later, someone will respond and give you some. The other day, it was impossible.
Clement Freud is challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, right, Clement. There are 38 seconds left, Clement. How to get some starting now?
I think one of the great things about this country in which we live is that now there is no one who should be unable to get some. If you're without it, if you're short, if you're taken, perhaps...
Derek Nimmo.
He was taken, hesitation.
Yes. Only taken. He had 4 ifs. Derek, there are 21 seconds on how to get some starting now.
Well, I'm determined to get some tonight, actually. As soon as I get out of this theatre, I'm going to be looking for it. My goodness, I'll be roaming up and down, wandering around. Down the street, I'll go along the Mall, through Leicester Square and Trafalgar Ditto, just to say, Peter Jones. And when I arrive, I'll see that great column thing at the end, with that distinguished admiral on the top.
Peter Jones, a challenge, sure.
Repetition.
Of what?
Well, you said ditto. I mean, that's the same as saying...
But he went down the Mall to Leicester Square, which is completely...
Well, that was devious, I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Derek Nimmo was helping you by saying that.
Was he?
Which he's been wanting to do all through
I
this
see,
session.
yes.
So you have 7 seconds, Peter, on how to get some, starting now.
Well, I am one of the people who happen to know how to get some, but I'm damned if I'm going to tell anybody here.
Clement Freud is challenged.
Did I?
Yes.
I think I just woke up.
Well, he was surprised
What did
you'd
he
gone
say?
to sleep.
I'm very sorry.
Well, he was saying it extremely well and the audience were enjoying it.
Oh, good.
Peter Jones, you have 2 seconds. No, 1 second left on how to get some, starting now.
Work at it.
Well, Peter Jones was then speaking when the whistle went, so he has moved forward rapidly and overtaken Andre, but he's only in 3rd place, alas. Derek Nimmo still in the lead, and Derek, your turn to begin. What I do with it is the follow-up subject. So you've told us how you get some, now tell us if you can what I do with it. Just a minute, starting now.
What I do with it is the question. Well, I generally put it with gin and call it ditto and it, and put a slice of lemon on the top of it and squash it down my throat, because I do sometimes put too much of the citrus fruit in with it. Other times, when I go round, as I said, I was going to after the programme tonight.
Andre Mary.
2 times there.
Yes, sometimes.
Yes, absolutely right. My goodness me, yes, right.
Andre, 40 seconds. What I do with it, starting now.
What I do with it is pretend it's not there. Sometimes in the middle of the floor, on the kitchen. I say to the rest of the family, how did it get there? Who's responsible? And nobody owns up. Not the dog, cat, children, husband, anybody. So I go about my business. I get the breakfast, cornflakes.
Derek Nimmo's challenge.
Having trouble with that cornflakes.
There are 21 seconds. What I do with it, Derek, starting now.
What I do with it, actually, is to take it with me, and when I arrive, I show it to the local populace, and they applaud me and say, we've never seen one of that size and magnitude before. And they look at me with a kind of admiration that you would not believe, because...
phraseology remind us of Kenneth Williams, then, who...
I'm trying to do a Peter Jones, actually.
And Clement Freud, will you begin the next round? How I avoid it. 60 seconds, starting now.
If you don't get any, and you don't know what to do with it, you are pretty well bound to pretend that you are avoiding it. And then you have to pretend... I said pretend before.
Yes, I've
now said pretend again. Did you challenge?
Yes, I did.
What for?
Pretend.
49 seconds.
Good challenge. It was a tough challenge.
Yes, a very sincere challenge.
Was, yes.
And also an accurate one. How I avoided, Andre, with you, 49 seconds, starting now.
Is not to say it again. Otherwise, you'll be challenged, and then you can't continue. It's extremely difficult, and I think we're all absolutely brilliant to be able to play this game at all. Not to deviate, hesitate, and, in fact, to avoid it.
Derek Nimmo challenged.
Yes. I have no reason at all. I withdraw my challenge. I actually made an absolute bog of it, you see, because, I mean, she repeated the subject, and you're allowed to do that, you see. So I'll avoid it by pretending I didn't know what she was talking about, if you see what I mean.
Derek, you can't get out. It was a wrong challenge. Andre has another point, and there are 34 seconds on how I avoid it, Andre, starting now.
When somebody says, could you possibly lend me a fiver, I pretend to go absolutely deaf. That's a very good way of avoiding it. A lovely view. Have you seen it? I say, let's go to the edge of the cliff and look down and then up. Derek Nimmo.
Clement's challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, right, Clement. 20 seconds, how I avoid it, starting now.
Falling hair is best avoided by dodging, but there are all sorts of other means of getting away from subjects with which you pretend you want no contact.
Andre Mary.
Can I have that pretend again?
Yes.
You've done it again.
Yes. I did it for you.
You can have it again.
And
you can also have 9 seconds, which is all that's left. And that is how I avoid it, and you start now.
The thing to do, if you want to avoid it, is not to challenge, and then you won't have it.
And Clement Freud has challenged you.
Repetition of challenge. She was talking about winning and challenging.
Yes.
I'm afraid. Challenge. She said challenge.
Did you say challenge before, Andre?
I don't remember what I
don't
said.
Don't think you said it before. Anyway, to my memory, she didn't, so we have to go by the chairman's memory, however fragile it may be.
We've been here this long.
6 seconds, how I avoided Andre, starting now.
Jump high in the air. Then with any luck, you won't land.
Derek Nimmo's challenge.
Well, Derek Nimmo was up, and that was up, so 2 ups.
Yes, there were 2 ups. They were quite right, Derek. 4 seconds, how I avoid it, starting now.
Well, I don't often avoid it, but when I do, I find it frightfully difficult. I rather enjoy it, actually, because...
Derek Nimmo was then speaking when the whistle went. He's got another point. He's increased his lead. He's got 13, the mystical 13 there, and to some, unlucky to others. And Andre, your turn to begin. The subject is the old-fashioned look. Can you talk on that for just a minute, starting now?
The old-fashioned look doesn't really exist anymore, because as soon as it's out, it comes in again. It's kind of instant nostalgia, very difficult to keep up with. 40s last month, 50s this, and don't know what it'll be.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Hesitation, I thought. No? Too tough?
No, a
Withdraw.
bit too tough. I don't think she really hesitated. No, Derek. 45 seconds for you to continue with the old-fashioned look, Andre, starting now.
What I do is wear my clothes for 10 years. They're bound to be in fashion at least twice, and that gets round the whole matter. There is, of course, another kind of old-fashioned look.
Clement Freud.
Repetition of course.
Yes, a tough one, but correct. So, Clement...
It's only your memory against ours, isn't it?
Which is what it must always be. 36 seconds.
She hadn't actually said, of course, but I wondered how your memory was.
Like Russian roulette, isn't it, really?
All I can say is your memory must be very bad, because I heard her say, of course, twice. And if you didn't hear her say it, then it must be an inspirational challenge, but as it was accurate, you get a point for it. And you take over the subject, and there are 36 seconds left, the old-fashioned look starting now.
When you looked at a barmaid in a particular sort of way, and she immediately dropped her décolleté dress and hiked up her socks, it used to be known as the old-fashioned look and was much appreciated in the latter part of the 19th century and a few years after that. I don't know what success was achieved, because it never appears to me that ladies who serve or dispense drink behind
Peter Jones
counters...
has challenged.
Hesitation. Hesitated about 4 times. Ladies who...
He repeated ladies, but he didn't hesitate.
No.
I thought he hesitated.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, he didn't hesitate, Peter. So that's your
Well,
challenge.
I've got a
It's
pretty
incorrect.
quick brain, I suppose. It just seemed to be hesitating to me. Because I was ahead of him
You
with
were
the words.
probably there with him, and you hesitated in your mind with what he was thinking. 10 seconds, Peter. I'm sorry, Clement, on the old-fashioned look starting now.
If you walk down the King's Road, Chelsea, you will find a number of shops which actually trade in the old...
Clement Freud was then speaking when the whistle went. He has moved forward, but Derek Nimmo is still in the lead, and we must be approaching towards the end of this week's contest. And Clement, your turn to begin. The subject is making a collection. And this is the last round. You have a chance to win if you want. You're only 2 points behind. Just a minute, starting now.
The best sort of collection that I think anybody could make is one of stuffed cockatoos, because it really isn't too difficult to corner the market. What you do is go from shop to emporium and ask the person, lady or gentleman behind the counter, whether perchance
Andre Melli has just...
Hesitation.
I agree, Andre, and you have a point, and you have 37 seconds left on making a collection starting now.
The kind of collection I make, though I don't really enjoy it, is in cups that go in the fridge, holding 1 egg yolk, a bit of fat, stock that never seems to get used and goes all furry. Those are the kind of things. I think many women perhaps do the same. And you cannot cure yourself of that.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Repetition of kind of collection and kind.
Yes, and you are right, Derek, and you have 19 seconds on making a collection starting now.
I collect stuffed thrushes. And what I do is I go around from shop to emporium, looking and seeing if they've got any of these little speckled birds in the window and say, what ho, could I...
Clement Freud has challenged.
Deviation.
Why?
A thrush isn't speckled.
It is.
The thrush
Not when
is-
it's stuffed.
Moulding.
That's right.
It's also a protected bird, and you're not allowed to sell them in shops or emporiums.
That
or
would
otherwise.
be deviation, but not on the speckle, because he has a lovely speckled breast. And
Not after a couple of weeks in formaldehyde.
but you can still refer to him as a speckled creature. I disagree with the challenge, which was a good try, as it's the last round, and no, Derek gets a point for an incorrect challenge, and he continues, and there are 7 seconds on making a collection, Derek, starting now.
I would like to make a collection for the parson who is overpaid and overprivileged.
No, Clement Freud got in just before the whistle.
Repetition of over.
Yes, it's correct, Clement, and you have half a second on making a collection starting now.
Speckled.
Well, in spite of Clement Freud's last thrust there, speaking when the whistle went and a point just before, he again finished in second place. Andre Mellet was in third place, Peter Jones just in fourth place, but once again, our winner this week by 2 clear points, Derek Nimmo. We do hope you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute. From all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.
We present Kenneth Williams, Clement Freud, Peter Jones and Sheila Hancock in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And once again, I'm going to ask our 4 experienced panelists if they can speak for just a minute on some unlikely subject that I'm going to give them without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject on the card which is in front of me. We'll begin the show this week with Kenneth Williams, and the subject, Kenneth, is my muscles. Will you talk about my muscles? 60 seconds, starting now.
Well, of course, these are a reference, or these should be a reference to...
And you've been buzzed right away by Clement Freud.
2 references.
I mean, there was 2 references, very long and definite words. So 55 seconds are left, Clement. You get the subject, you get a point for a correct challenge, and you go on it for my muscles, starting now.
I collect my mussels from among the rocks and seaweeds, especially on the west coast of Scotland, where during the months of September, October, November, December, January, and April, they are particularly succulent. Best eaten.
Sheila Hancock is challenged.
Well, I was going to say hesitation, but that was a bit hard.
Yes, I thought there was a hesitation there. Yes, he didn't quite keep the flow going. There are 36
Unlike you, I suppose.
You got a bit too succulent.
He ran out of months and he couldn't think of anything else to say.
Sheila, you have a correct challenge. You have a point. You have 36 seconds. My muscles, starting now.
Well, my muscles are getting a bit of a worry because they're becoming slightly flabby. So therefore, I spend 5 or 10 minutes each day having a little exercise in order to tone them up.
Peter Jones is challenged.
Repetition of little.
Yes, I'm afraid you did say little before, Sheila. Yeah. 25 seconds left for my muscles, Peter, with you now.
Well, I'm very grateful to my muscles because they keep my skeleton together and prevent me from coming apart altogether. And they enable me to move and lift things because I'm immensely strong. I may not appear so to the casual observer, and certainly the radio listeners are not in any position to know. But great weights can be raised from the ground with...
Well, as usual, the whistle which goes after 60 seconds tells us the time is up, and whoever's speaking at that moment gets an extra point. It was Peter Jones, so at the end of that round, he's taken a very strong lead. Clement Freud, will you begin the next round? The subject is a first-class sausage. Will you talk about one for just a minute, starting now?
A first-class sausage really should be more than just a succulent titbit. When, for instance, I was escape officer in a boarding house in Eastbourne, first-class sausages were used as a rope in order that people might leave the hostelry late at night or possibly get in early in the morning. The casing should be thick and tough and glutinous, whereas the contents, not more than 40% bread, and ideally 55% meat with turmeric.
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of percent.
Yes, quite right, Peter. Another correct challenge, another point to you. 28 seconds, a first-class sausage, starting now.
Now, I'm not allowed to tell you where these first-class sausages that I eat are obtainable in London, but if any listeners would care to send me a stamped addressed envelope, I should be delighted.
Kenneth Williams.
Deviation, this is pure advertising. I've never heard anything so outrageous in my life. It's positively blatant.
But he said that he would ask these
The
postcards
most important thing about a first-class sausage is finding out where to get one.
And if you write to him, he'll tell them, according to him. So, well tried, but I'm sorry, Kenneth, I disagree. There are 17 seconds for Peter to continue on a first-class sausage, starting now.
They are 99% pork, and really succulent and rich. The actual skins...
Sheila Hancock.
I don't believe they could be 99% pork. They wouldn't stick together. They'd be a pork chop.
Oh, because they're in a skin. They're in a skin.
Well, that is one of those I must put to the audience, because I think Sheila's got a very good challenge. If you think that Sheila Hancock is right in her challenge, and it's not a first-class sausage, 99% meat, you cheer for Sheila, you boo for Peter, you do it all together now. Thank you for those two boos at the end. The cheers have it, a 99% meat sausage. We don't consider it a sausage, and Sheila has 9 seconds to continue on the subject, starting now.
This is sizzling and hot and has little pricks from the forks with fat oozing out of it and is usually about...
Sheila Hancock was then speaking when the whistle went. 60 seconds was up at that moment, and she gained the extra point, and she's in second place at the end of that round. Peter Jones still in the lead, and Peter Jones to begin the next round. Peter, what upsets me most? Would you talk on that for just a minute, starting now?
Those shopping trolleys that people drag up and down Oxford Street. I've been brought to my knees twice in the last month by those vehicles. They've got things that stick out like Boadicea's chariot, and they scar the leg tissues and up above the ankle, very likely, and I've been mutilated.
Kenneth Williams'
Hesitation.
I would agree with that hesitation, Kenneth, so you get a point for a correct one. 40 seconds to continue on. What upsets me most, starting now?
Is when people interrupt me in this programme. I think it's absolutely disgraceful. I've come all the way to Great Portland Street. I mean, it's not an area I usually frequent, but I've come here at great expense and considerable inconvenience, and I get in, and what happens? The first time I was going to go on about my muscles, my pectoral ones, gleam in the suntan oil. They bring you on. If you could only get a glimpse, you'd see what I was going on about. You know what I mean? And then I come here. Shut up, you. Shut your mouth. I'll deal with you after.
Kenneth, you have been challenged by Clement, Freud, Sheila Hancock, and Peter Jones.
I do beg your pardon, Clement.
In that order, Clement challenged you first. Clement, what was it?
You name it. He did repeat, you know what I mean, a couple of times.
Yes, you did repeat yourself. Clement got in first. There are 13 seconds on what upsets me most, starting now.
What upsets me most is when people talk about electrified haggises, which obviously don't exist. There seems to me no such thing in the culinary...
Peter Jones has challenged.
He's talking about electrified haggises and admits that they don't exist, and yet I was picked up on 100% pork sausage. I mean, it's just ludicrous. 100%.
The only person I've ever heard talk about an electrified haggis was Clement Freud. And he's just said when people talk on it, it bores him death. So if he bores himself to death, it must be extremely devious. And so you must therefore have the subject with 4 seconds to go. What upsets me most, starting now?
Well, it's one of these ludicrous rules that is bent to serve the whims.
And Peter Jones, speaking again when the whistle went, increased his lead at the end of that round. Sheila Hancock, your turn to begin, and the subject is My Baby.
Oh.
So would you talk about it for 60 seconds, starting now?
Well, it was born a little while ago at a weight of 8 pounds, 2 ounces. And very splendid she is, too, called Joanna Susie, and I think really rather pretty for a tiny creature, because usually they're rather plain. She has long black hair, which is beginning to fall out, I'm afraid to say now. Tiny little fingers, and everything is perfectly all right, which was the first thing I checked when she appeared. I must say I'm happier that she's outside, because the last time I was on the programme she wasn't, and I enjoy looking at her rather than just feeling her. I can't think of it.
Kenneth Williams.
Of obvious hesitation.
Yes, you are obviously
Well,
there. And you also have the subject.
She's so new, I can't think of anything to say about it.
But it was lovely what you did, and I'm sorry she wasn't at home to hear it all.
What are you going to say about your baby, then? I can't
That's
wait.
what... That's why we're so delighted you hesitated, Sheila. Because Kenneth Williams has 21 seconds to talk about my baby starting now.
Well, it's one of those sayings, if one has a particular pet possession, that it is my baby. One often hears, that's his baby. And I suppose an actor giving birth to a performance full of pregnancy and joy and the burgeoning of loveliness could be said.
Well, on this occasion, it was Kenneth Williams speaking when the whistle went, so he gained that extra point. Kenneth, we're back with you. Would you start the next round? The subject, a nice historical one that I know Ian Mester's thought of especially for you, Pope Joan. Would you talk about her for just a minute? Starting now.
Well, all this is apocryphal. She never really existed. The story goes that it was a woman dressed up as a bloke and that her parents were English, but I doubt it. It says that the impersonation was so clever that she actually got into the processional route from the Lateran to St. Peter's and on the way gave birth to this child and, of course, was found out not to be a bloke at all in having the baby. Well, I mean, because they'd know, wouldn't they, if she was having the baby? You would know. But, of course, that route's been avoided ever since by all the processions, you know. But I don't believe a word. I don't think there ever was a Pope Joan. I think it's just a sort of material people use just like these silly books.
I'd save it in case you get back in again, because you have actually been challenged by Clement Freud.
Who was it?
Your friend next to Clement Freud.
Oh, Clement, you again. Yes, go on. What were you going to say, love? What was your point?
Of course, repetition.
Clement, you have a correct challenge. You have 32 seconds on Pope Joan starting now.
Pope Joan is not someone who actually existed, but on the other hand, Pope John, often pronounced by people who were incapable of enunciating vowels properly, might well have been the person Ian Messiter thought of when he put this on the card. The gentleman...
Kenneth Williams.
Deviation. I mean, not only is it absolutely devious insofar as Ian Messiter would never mix up his names in that fashion. He's an extremely accurate man, well known for his accuracy and his academic and moreover, it's deviation because it's not the subject on the card, which is Joan and not John. So there you are. Deviation.
I don't really know what you're...
Well, of course you don't. Your brain's so slow in going round. Look at you. Reviving. Give him some sal volatile, for goodness sake. Or a firework up somewhere, I don't know. It's a disgrace. Well,
Kenneth,
come on, what's your decision?
you have Pope Joan for 14 seconds starting now.
I don't want her back again.
Sheila Hancock is challenged.
If he doesn't want her back again, I'll have her.
All right, you have 13 seconds on Pope Joan starting now.
When I was at school, there was a girl in my class called Joan Pope. And on the register, it was Pope Joan, because you know you have the surnames first when they call it out
Williams,
in the morning.
Kenneth, I was.
And it's Hancock, Sheila, Pope, Joan. And this girl...
Oh, I was thinking what worked out.
Well, it's a very even contest so far. Sheila, again speaking when the whistle went, has gone into second place with that extra point. Peter Jones still in the lead, and Clement Freud to begin the next round. Censorship, Clement. Can you talk on that for just a minute, starting now?
Censorship is the name given to when one man imposes...
Kenneth Williams.
I thought it was all a terrible mess. I just came in to help him out. I mean... Give the name to when one. I mean, he didn't seem to know what he was doing. Talks about me with my courses. He wants to learn his grammar. It's a disgrace.
So what is your challenge?
Well, deviation, obviously.
On what
It's not
basis,
English.
though? What deviation of what?
Of the English language. He was deviating from what is proper grammar.
There are 54 seconds for you on censorship, Kenneth, starting now.
This is the kind of thing that's indulged in usually by the state because they think things don't ought not.
Clement Freud's challenge.
Repetition of coconut.
Of coconut. No, he didn't repeat coconut. He repeated quite a lot. It wasn't coconut. So, Kenneth, you have another point, and you have 50 seconds on censorship, starting now.
It has its roots in England in a sort of political morality, which is largely the result of the puritanical regime set up by that junta headed by Oliver Cromwell. And they decided that certain passages, including Dr. Bowdler, he had another hand in it, should be exorcised or excised, to whichever your proclivities lead you towards, from the works of such people as Chaucer or Shakespeare, and I might add, the Bible. They even interfere with what happened to Lot. But she did say, don't look back to the wife, you see. Well, of course she did, and what turned her bitter assault, which is all right.
Sheila Hancock's challenge.
She did say, don't look back to the wife.
Well, to quote you, my proclivities turn me towards Sheila on this occasion. See, Sheila.
Yes, well, I don't blame you. You've got very good taste.
13 seconds on censorship, Sheila, starting now.
Censorship actually is non-existent in this country, except when it's...
Kenneth Williams' challenge.
Censorship does exist in this country, and it's absurd to sit there and say
I was
that
just
it
about
doesn't.
to say, except...
You said except?
Except when... You didn't let me finish.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Oh, I feel awful now. Oh, you've mortified me, you have. I mean, gently reproving me with that graciousness of yours. Oh, I feel dreadful. Oh, do continue.
8.5 seconds on censorship, Sheila, starting now.
Imposed by various bodies like the BBC.
Oh, Clement Freud's challenge.
Repetition of B.
Yes, Clement. You have 3.5 seconds on censorship, starting now.
There's a film called Night Watchman on the
Clement Freud was then speaking when the whistle went. He got that extra point. Peter stayed still for quite a time. But maybe you have a chance to move now, Peter. You have the starting subject. It's what I do in the rain. Can you talk about that for just a minute, starting now?
Well, it depends largely on what I happen to be wearing at the time. I have been known to cook on the barbecue in the garden while it's pouring and guests watch through the window, applauding or whatever it is they do, looking amused and laughing and enjoying it thoroughly because they see that I am thoroughly uncomfortable. And then if I get enough applause and appreciation...
Clement Freud.
Repetition of applause.
Yes. Because the people applauded you before.
I think they were applauding, actually, but still.
Yes, applauded, and this is applause.
They were
you see.
standing
I carefully thought of that.
You didn't.
I can't.
Right, Peter Jones, you have another point. 30 seconds.
No,
What I
you
do in the
owe me a
rain,
point.
starting now.
And if people clap...
And Clement Freud challenge.
Hesitation.
No, he
Rubbish!
didn't. 29 seconds of what I do in the rain, Peter, starting now.
If enough people put their hands together, I streak round the garden. And...
Start stripping, Peter. Kenneth, you challenge.
I challenged on the grounds this is a family show and I don't want to hear a load of filth. And I also object to this crowd here clapping at that disgusting suggestion of people running around naked.
There you are, you see, after all, that business about Lot and his wife...
But when you talked about a family show, they applauded for him to streak, so they can't be much of a family audience.
No, they can't.
So therefore, unless they want to start a family, of course, the...
Adam and Eve did streak, I mean...
Oh, yes, they definitely streaked, yes. There are 24 seconds for you, Peter, to continue after an incorrect challenge on what I do in the rain, starting now.
It can be very pleasant and stimulating and refreshing if you don't care about the apparel that you have on and just wait around getting sopping, but knowing that at the end of it all you can go home and have a hot shower and a cold martini or whiskey, whatever your proclivities suggest to you.
Sheila Hancock's challenge.
Proclivities.
I've never used that word before in my life, let alone in this program.
No, I know, yeah, you got it though, mate. Don't worry, you pinched it. You pinched that word off
he
me.
did it.
That's
He
nice.
did
That's something. Nobody's got any right to do that. I'm the one that says
Oh, shut up, Kenneth.
That's right. Put people down, you rotten bully. You filthy slut.
Well, in that case, he repeated garden a long time ago, too.
Well, it's too late. You challenge on proclivities. He has not used it before, to my knowledge, ever in his life. And so there are 3 seconds on What I Do in the Rain, Peter, starting now.
I just put my umbrella up and I sing because...
Well, ladies and gentlemen and listeners, that was a very unusual round because as they were all incorrect challenges, Peter Jones now has a commanding lead. Sheila, your turn to begin. The subject is my favourite pub. Would you talk about that for just a minute, starting now?
I find this rather difficult to talk about because I don't honestly like them very much, having been brought up in one. And if you have the smell of beer in your nostrils for the rest of your life because it gets into your clothes and your hair and everything. However,
Clement Freud is challenged.
Deviation.
Why?
Doesn't get into my hair.
Give Clement a point for a good challenge. Leave the subject with Sheila Hancock, my favourite pub. There are 44 seconds left, starting now.
There is, however, a very nice one in Gloucestershire.
Peter Jones.
Repetition of however.
Peter, you have 42 seconds on my favourite pub, starting now.
Well, it has a lot of very nice horse brasses and no piped music, just a piano on the right-hand side of the bar. And a lot of the locals come in quite regularly, and I am on very good terms with them, and also with the barmaid, the landlord, and his charming wife, who has very elaborate hairdos and tinkling earrings. The beer is not of the best quality, but then I'm not a particular connoisseur of this liquid because I prefer a tot of wine or even of spirits on occasion. There's a roaring coal fire in the...
Peter Jones is in great form this week. He's increased his lead. He's way ahead of the others. And Kenneth Williams, your turn to begin. The subject is gas. Can you talk about that for just a minute, starting now?
It begins, of course, a little blue flame which came out of the marsh and was known as a will-o'-the-wisp. And, of course, over the years we've realised...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of course.
52 seconds on gas with you, Clement, starting now. Kenneth has challenged. Your light didn't come on, Kenneth, and you've got gas back again for hesitation. Well done. There are 49 seconds on gas with you, starting now.
Ours comes to us from Bacton, which is in Norfolk. It's piped through these various mechanics, and the pumps have to...
Clement Freud.
Deviation. You cannot pipe through a mechanic.
Yes, you see, you're wrong. Now, there he's wrong, you see, because he's thinking of mechanics in the terms of the people that do mechanical work, but there's another definition in the dictionary of mechanics, and it means mechanisms, mechanics, you see.
I think he had a very good challenge.
No, it's not a good challenge at all.
I think he had a very good challenge, and I'm going to give him a point and the subject. And there are 39 seconds on gas, Clement, starting now.
When our house was converted from one type of gas to another, a number of people arrived, dismantled the stove, undid the central heating pipes, and moved in. In fact, they paid a week's rent in advance because they said this may well take a long time, and of course, they were right.
Kenneth Williams is challenged.
Oh, deviation. And I don't want anything like that said about an authority like that. They're wonderful, those boys, those lovely lads. Oh, they're wonderful. They've done a wonderful job for me. I mean, I can't tell you what I would have been through.
Well, I can say they came up to do the same job for me 3 times, and each time they came up and did a different job.
Well, you've probably got a difficult flu. They're like 9, dear. They're wonderful.
I got a little letter when I said that they hadn't dismantled the correct pipe, and they wrote back saying, Dear sir, we cannot find your pipe.
Oh, I didn't know you were a smoker. The wit. Laugh, I nearly brought my own beer.
There are 14 seconds for you on gas. Yes, Kenneth, starting now.
Well, where would we be without it? And the wonderful thing about the new form is that it is totally without odour. And consequently, who's buzzing?
Hancock was challenged.
Repetition of without.
Oh, that's not fair.
You are awful. You know you lack any kind of gallantry. That's the one thing about you. You've got no decent manners.
Well, I've been challenged for however.
Yes, that's true. Oh, yes, well, that's true.
Sheila, you have 6 seconds on gas starting now.
The Americans call wind gas. And in Dr. Spock it says about you have to bring it...
Well, they all got some points talking about gas, and I've just had a message that we have no more time for this particular game, so let me give you now the final result. Clement Freud and Kenneth Williams were equal in 3rd place. They were behind Sheila Hancock, but Peter Jones was undoubtedly our winner, way in the lead. This week's winner, Peter Jones. We hope that you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute. From all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by John Lloyd.
We present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud and Andre Melly in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we welcome Andre Melly back to the 4th seat, or the guest seat, against our 3 regular and intrepid and impossible competitors of the game. As usual, I'll ask them to speak, if they can, for just 1 minute on some unlikely subject without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject on the card in front of me. Let us begin the show this week with Kenneth Williams. And Kenneth, a lovely subject for you, getting carried away. Would you talk about that for just a minute, if you can, starting now?
I frequently do this, especially when the muse lights upon my brow, and I recall lines of such fame as the old order changeth, yielding place to new. And God fulfills himself in many ways, lest one good custom should corrupt the world. Comfort thyself, what comfort is in me? I have lived my life in that which I have done. May he within himself make pure. It was a dark and stormy night, and the moon was shining bright with the old rusty bridge by the mill. She said, "Oui, oui, parlez-vous." I said, "Yes, but not with you."
Clement Freud has challenged you.
Repetition.
Yes. You repeated we. Clement Freud has a correct challenge, a point for that. He takes over the subject. 35 seconds left, starting now.
Getting carried away is particularly easy when you have Kenneth Williams breathing down your right ear, and your knee goes, and your foot, your hand, your trouser up.
Andre Melly has challenged.
A repetition of about 4 yours.
Oh, we're not doing parts of speech. Is she allowed to do that?
Well, she is allowed to do it, but we do try and resist the temptation on yours and these and ands and buts.
I mean,
but she, quiet, Kenneth.
Well, I'm just
She's done it, so we give her a point. You have 22 seconds on getting carried away, starting now.
The important thing, I feel, if there's any danger of you getting carried away, is to have nothing that can fall out of your pockets. If you're a woman, it's advisable to wear trousers, because you don't want your frilly knickers to be seen on such a serious occasion as a demo when you are in danger of being carried away.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Repetition of danger.
Hesitation.
There was a repetition of danger, and Derek's got in cleverly with only 2 seconds to go. Getting carried away, Derek, started.
Oh, what an exciting thing to talk about, getting carried away!
Just to remind you, the whistle tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking at that moment gets the extra point. Derek, you have a lead at the end of that round of 1 over over 2 others and 2 over 1. Derek, will you begin the next round, please? The subject is dolphins. Can you talk about them for just a minute, starting now?
Dolphins are one of the larger sea-going mammals, rather smaller than the whale and larger than a porpoise.
Andre Melli.
A repetition of two largers.
Absolutely right. Well listened.
And that's their sort of one-upmanship way of intimidating
Wasn't
the
at
people.
all. It was just being nice and pleasant. You don't all have to be nasty like you and sneer, eh?
Well, you must have changed then, Derek. Andre, you have a point and 52 seconds on dolphins starting now.
There was a craze a few years ago for dolphins, and you kept finding them in Brighton.
Kenneth Williams has challenged.
Deviation, there was no craze for dolphins. I was never mad about them at all.
I was thought that actually, if you'd said there is still a craze for dolphins, I'd have said yes. Therefore,
There
she
isn't at all.
But you weren't asked.
And there was a definite craze. There were dolphinariums, and even the U.S. Navy were training dolphins to attack submarines. There was a craze for dolphins. There are 47 seconds for Andre to continue, starting now.
Most people, with the exception of Kenneth Williams, were rather mad about dolphins and used to go and watch them splashing about indoors.
Clement Freud.
That's 4 bouts.
All right, you've got your own back. Now let's leave the little words alone after this. And Clement a point and 35 seconds for dolphins. Clement, starting now.
If you go down the main street of Helsinki, you will find a toy shop which is absolutely full of dolphins, which are the Finnish equivalent of small toys given to boys and girls, which they take their clothes off and put them on again. Some have frilly knickers and others have plain white and green shirts, emblazoned in the national...
Derek Nimmo.
I don't think a shirt that's white and green is plain. I thought it was rather nasty.
I disagree with the challenge. 12 seconds, Clement, on dolphins, starting now.
There was a time when people were absolutely crazy
Derek
about
Nimmo's
dolphins.
Time, repetition of time.
Yes. No, you had the times, didn't you? And he had the times, but not Clement. I'm very sorry, Clement. Another point to you, 9 seconds, starting now.
And especially in Great Yarmouth, where there was a dolphinarium, people queued up for days on end, paying 5p, 10...
Andre Melli.
I don't think, in spite of the craze, that they actually queued up for days on end.
Oh, yes. Every day they were queuing for dolphins.
Not for days
Not on
end. Were they queuing? I think it's a good challenge. Andre has a point with only 2 seconds to go, starting now.
There's a smashing man who stands there on top of the thing.
She was saying that people were mad about it. She was having half the promotion to many people.
Andre Melli then got in cleverly before the whistle, got the extra point, and she's in the lead at the end of that round. Clement Freud, your turn to begin. A lovely subject, the Keystone Cops. Can you talk about them for just a minute, starting now?
My children think the Keystone Cops are actually Curbstone Cops, which is a mistake because they shouldn't be confused. For this reason, whenever I park my car, I leave the clerical collar and the crutches in the back, so that when this attendant comes along, intent on leaving a ticket on the windscreen, he or she is disillusioned and goes off, taking another automobile for a similar purpose. The Keystone Cops played in...
Andre Melli.
A hesitation.
Yes, I would have thought so. He suddenly realized he hadn't been talking about the subject. You could have had him for deviation ages ago.
Oh, but it was brilliant, wasn't it?
It was boring, actually. But 31 seconds on the Keystones Cops. Andre, starting now.
The only kind I know are those in the cinema which move very fast and fall in and out of cars with piano music going. And people go mad about it, saying, isn't it marvellous? And I've never actually found it very funny. I suppose it's my lack of sense of humour. But that particular sort of rushing about, trying to catch somebody who, I mean...
Kenneth Williams.
Hesitation.
I
Yes,
agree,
thank
Kenneth.
you.
I agree. There are 11 seconds for you, Kenneth, on the the Keystone Cops, starting now.
This all began when Isaac Newton had the apple hit him on the ear and he invented slapstick. And so, consequently, this was put to great use by people like Laurel and Hardy.
Clement Freud is challenged.
Deviation.
Yes, I don't think Isaac Newton had anything to do with the creation of the Keystone Cops, even with your bizarre connections you tried to associate. 3 seconds, Clement, on the Keystone Cops starting now.
The Municipal Cinema in Totnes.
Clement Freud, then speaking when the whistle went, got the extra point. He's now equal in the lead with Andre Melly. Derek Nimmo and Kenneth Williams are both trailing behind a little. Andre Melly, your turn to begin. If I were queen for a day, can you talk about that for just a minute, starting now?
If I were queen for a day, I'd go along to Westminster and close Parliament instead of opening it. Then rush back to the palace for a quick coffee, change, take a royal jet, and go for the sea.
Clement Freud.
Deviation.
Why?
If she were queen, she couldn't change.
Brilliant. I understood her to mean she was going to change her clothes.
Well, if you understand her to say things she doesn't say, let's play some other game night.
Precisely.
I will have to bow to the superior wisdom of our audience here. If you thought the same as I did, that that's what Andre conveyed, then you cheer for her. But if you thought, as Clement Freud, that she was changing from being queen for a day, which was then deviation, you boo for Clement, and you all do it together now. Andre Melly, if I were queen for a day, 46 seconds with you, starting now.
Getting out of my tiara and that bejeweled dress, I would then
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Yes, Derek.
Yes, Derek. Now, Derek, you have 42 seconds to talk on the subject of if I were queen for a day. Starting now.
Well, I should like to be queen for a day on my birthday, and I would ride out side saddle down the Mall to inspect my troops, the household cavalry and the brigade of guards assembled in Horse Guards parade. In I should trot very slowly, and all my splendid soldiers drawn up, and I would look magnificent with medals trembling on my bosom, and I would wave to the populace with a dignified way. Oh yes, they say, he looks lovely out there, doesn't he? Oh, what no lovely to see, my loyal subject.
Well, obviously, Derek, if you were going to put on a performance like that, they'd like you to be queen for the day. Oh, you got an extra point then, Derek, for speaking when the whistle went, and so you have moved forward, but you're still in 3rd place, Andre in the lead, Clement 2nd place, Kenneth 4th place, and Kenneth, your turn to begin again. The subject, James Joyce. Would you talk about him for 60 seconds, starting now?
Well, like so many other talented people from Ireland, he left it and went to France, following much in the footsteps, I suppose, of Wilde, and wrote there quite a lot of things. I suppose the most influential must be called Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. The other one is Ulysses, which was banned for indecency by Great Britain and by the United States. His effect in writing is to use puns, many-faceted, in a greatly suggestive way, using time both in the conscious and unconscious sense, which has influenced, I think it would be fair to say, quite a lot of novel writing, though I frankly don't care.
Clement.
Hesitation.
Yes, and he kept going for 56 seconds. 4 seconds for James Joyce with you, Clement Freud, starting now.
One of the most impressive things that James Joyce wrote in 4 seconds.
Well, he did hesitate. Clement got in first. He got a point for doing so, and he's now in the lead at the end of that round. Derek Nimmo, we're back with you. Your turn to begin. The subject, for what I would like to be remembered. for what I would like to be remembered. Can you talk on that for just a minute, starting now?
I don't know. Whatever I am remembered by, I would like to have written upon my tombstone in some gentle churchyard in rural England, or perhaps even in Scotland. One has said, here lies the bones of Elizabeth Charlotte, born a virgin, died a harlot.
Deviation.
Why?
Here lie, not here lies.
It's wrong English, that's true.
If you wish to be pedantic, then you're entitled to do so, and you get a point for doing so, and you have 42 seconds for what I'd like to be remembered, Clement, starting now.
I would like to be remembered for being the man who challenged Derek Nimmo on grammatical inaccuracies, time and again, when members of this team slip up on things which they should remember. I am here to put them right. The chairman sits waffling away, puffing at his zoot suit, snarling at his poor wife who sits oppressed in the audience, while his harassed...
Andre Melly has challenged.
I've seen Nicholas Parsons do many things, but not puff.
That's an observation.
What?
That sounded more
I
like an
don't
observation.
think I puff. Do I puff, audience? Yes. Andre Melly, you have a point.
Thank you.
And you have 15 seconds for what I'd like to be remembered, starting now.
What I'd like to be remembered for are some of the memorable performances I gave in repertory in my early days. The third ferret in Toad of Toad Hall was something...
Clement Freud.
Repetition, I'm afraid.
Of Toad.
Two toads.
Of Toad Hall, yes. 5 seconds, Clement, on for what I'd like to be remembered, starting now.
At the open-air theatre in Regent's Park.
Derek Nimmo.
I don't want to remember Clement Freud at all. I just want to forget him. Derry Ball. Reason Bar. Nobody wants to remember Clement Freud. Put it to the audience. Does anybody want to remember Clement Freud? No. He can't talk about being remembered.
You see, the point is
instantly
that whether
forgettable.
you or anybody wishes to remember Clement Freud or not, the subject is for what I would like to be remembered. And even if you don't want to remember him, he can still talk about the subject. Clement, you have another point and 2 seconds on for what I'd like to be remembered, starting now.
A sheer warm-hearted affection.
And Clement Freud was again speaking when the whistle went and has again increased his lead. And Clement, we're back with you to start. The subject is dissertations. You've given us 1 or 2 already, but can you talk on the subject for just a minute, starting now?
Dissertations, the sort of things Derek Nimmo would find immensely boring. Friends, Romans, and countrymen, lend me your ears because I can't see you on Tuesday. The shops are closed. Or, to put it another way, a parson or clergyman of some lesser order, even a bishop perhaps, might rise in a chapel and address the congregation in the following manner. You over there, not forgetting the bride's mother, but...
Kenneth Williams, a challenge.
This is not a dissertation we're giving by our bishop. It's a disgraceful deviation.
25 seconds for you, Kenneth, on dissertation, starting now.
It was long ago remarked by an ancient divine that all the public know about a man is his reputation. As to his character, only our Creator can know of that. The innermost conscience of the human mind is inviolable and a sacred thing which no one...
Andre Melly, your turn to begin. The subject, my favourite stockings. Can you talk about your favourite stockings for just a minute, starting now?
My favourite stockings were the very first nylons that I ever had. I was in Switzerland at the time being finished, and I saved up all the francs I could, and they were dark brown, practically black, and glassy in texture, and rather short, and had sort of...
Kenneth Williams,
I think a hesitation.
Yeah, you think right. She thought about the sort of bit of her stockings, and she stopped. 40 seconds are left on my favourite stockings, Kenneth. Will you talk about it starting now?
I had to wear them in a pantomime which I performed in Nisun, which is quite near to Singapore. And wearing them, I came on crying, "I'm the fairy of the wood, I go about doing good." And solving every riddle. Forget about your mandolin, I'll teach you how to fiddle. Which went quite well. And people said, "What a shapely calf you are showing tonight." I said yes, and I had to use a bit of lipstick because they laddered in a particularly crucial part of the number. But somebody had warned me that provided you put on this particular kind of
Andre Melly.
2 particulars.
Yes, there were 2 particulars, I'm afraid. You were very particular about those stockings. 4 seconds on my favourite stockings, Andre, starting now.
I took great care of them, but one did ladder, and I got my nail varnish.
Andre Melly is then speaking when the whistle went, gained that extra point, and she's moved forward a little bit. She's still trailing behind Clement Freud, who is our leader. She's in second place. Kenneth Williams, again, your turn to begin. Having women in the show.
Oh.
You've often complained about the fact that there shouldn't be women in the show. Now, would you talk on the subject for just a minute, if you can, starting now?
I think the chairman of this game does really live in another world. The idea that I've ever complained about the grace and charm of feminine company is so alien and ludicrous to my mind that I won't even bother to discuss it. In fact, I don't know.
Clement Freud is challenged.
I thought I'd take over in that case.
So what is your challenge?
He said he didn't want to discuss it.
Neither hesitation, repetition, or deviation, so he keeps the subject, and another point for doing for a wrong challenge, and 43 seconds left. Having women in the show, Kenneth, starting now.
Having women in the show means that we welcome the sylph-like figure of Andre Melly, dressed as always in this impeccable style of hers, which I think has been taught by some of the finest couturiers in...
Clement Freud.
Deviation.
Why?
It's couturier, not couturiers.
I knew you were going to say that, you rotten so-and-so. But it's a correct challenge, so I have to allow it.
No, it's not a correct challenge at all. I said couturier, and that's perfectly correct. I said couturier, didn't I?
Yes! You are browbeating this audience into submission to your way of thinking. We're not doubting the fact that you know the word and you can pronounce it, but sometimes under pressure it is possible to mispronounce a word, as
anyway,
I often do.
Even if I did, which I don't admit for 1 second, there's nothing in the great game about mispronunciation. It's about hesitation, deviation, and something else. What is it?
Actually, you were deviating from the correct pronunciation.
Deviating from the subject is what this game is about.
No.
Thank you very much. Yes. Great,
all right, Kenneth, all right. The audience say you should continue. And you have 27 seconds for having women in the show starting now.
Having women in the show has enabled me to make the acquaintance of some charming ladies, including Sheila Hancock.
Derek Nimmo.
Repetition of ladies. We had ladies before. The subject on the card is women, not ladies.
But I don't remember saying ladies before.
I didn't. What a load of
we never used the word. 16 seconds, Kenneth, on having women in the show starting now.
And the delightful thing about these creatures is that they bring to it an atmosphere of warmth, affection, joie de vivre, and all the qualities which men so lamentably lack. In fact, we cannot compete with women when it comes... So that means I'm in the lead, doesn't it?
It means you've worked the audience up into a purely partisan group for you out there. You were speaking
when... Don't be bitter, Ducky, don't be bitter.
I'm not competing, I'm not bitter. You were speaking when the whistle went, Kenneth. You got the extra point. You started with a subject, you finished with a subject. You got a lot of points in that round, and you have moved forward dramatically.
Yes.
Into third place.
Oh.
You've Well taken, Derek Nimmo. You're 2 points behind Andre Melli, and you are 4 points behind Clement Freud. And Derek, it is your turn to begin, so this is an open contest. Treasure hunts, Derek. Can you talk on that subject for just a minute, starting now?
Oh, my goodness, isn't it exciting to go on a treasure hunt? I've always liked it from my very earliest formative years. But to go into a darkened library, open an ancient volume and find a piece of parchment there with little dots and dashes even, and a mark showing where the treasure is hidden. And away you go to some windswept palm tree-ridden island and dig in the sand and find the skeleton and doubloons and pieces of egg. Gosh, it is the most exciting thing I've ever come across. On the other hand, Cloudesley shovel, rocked on those awful, tiny, speary things in the silly islands. Or perhaps finding deep in the Mediterranean a two-handed Roman urn, bringing it up, and for it to see the light of the day for the first time.
Andre Melli, challenge.
There was a tiny hesitation just there.
There wasn't.
Oh, there
The South Seas, doublooning and amphorae
nice
and goodness knows what. 12 seconds, Derek, on treasure hunt, starting now.
A great chest filled with gold, silver, and I am the owner of it all. I go along to Her Majesty's government and say, please, will you accept this for Her Gracious Majesty the Queen on my behalf?
Well, Derek Nimmo kept going magnificently on treasure hunts, and once again, someone started with a subject, finished with it, he got the extra point. Well, he got the extra point and also the extra point before speaking when the whistle went. But we have no more time to play the game, so I have to give you the final score now. And Derek, in spite of that last surge, did finish in 4th place, I'm afraid. Kenneth finished in 3rd place. Andre Melli was in 2nd place. But once again, our winner was Clement Freud. Hope you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute. From all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Simon Brett.